p.m. and I'm calling to order a work session of the Town of Silverton Board of Trustees. Our topic for this evening is the Town Administrator request for proposal. Included in our packet was a draft proposal that is pretty much a copy paste of the one used in 2019 with names and dates updated, as well as an updated intro page based on information like the current year-round population. Based on everyone's reading, what kind of comments, thoughts, questions, ideas, suggestions do we have for moving this forward?
Yeah, my question, I guess, was did we, for the previous administrators, did we hire an executive search firm to find them? Or like a headhunting firm or something?
No, we did not.
Okay.
There has never been the funds available.
Sure.
Sorry, I'm just gonna, I should be able to, let me see if video stays stable. Okay, so I'm gonna go next. I do have an issue with, let me click back over to it. We've got introduction. Applications for town administrator shall be received by blank PM on March, and then it says sent to or sent directly to Mayor Furman's email. Then it says any questions or clarifications should be directed only to the mayor's email. And then submission date, location, and opening all of a sudden is submitted to Anthony's email. And we had an issue with this in previous submission packets. So we made everything, it goes to both, and we also had it go to the town attorney. So since we are going to be losing the town attorney, because he then sent them all to every single one of the board members, because I had mentioned, and I can read the email if I need to, on the last search, there was somebody who had submitted an application, and that application never made it in its way to all of us as trustees. And I asked about it. I was told that submission was late. She screenshotted her submission and it was not late. So that's why this time we had all the information run through multiple sources. So in case somebody didn't see an email or something like that, it went to everybody. So I don't know if this board is in favor of that, but it helps keep the checks and balances going because everyone is fallible, and that was proven last time.
So just to get clarification, so there's in the introduction, it's sent to the mayor as right now. In the inquiries and corrections, it's sent to the mayor. And then in the submissions, which should be congruent with at least the introduction, it was sent to myself. The question I have, are you wanting our submissions sent to, go ahead.
All three of the emails. I think we listed last time it was Michelle and the mayor, and then we moved it and we changed it. And I believe Paul helped field them. Just because, like I said, that one lady fell through the cracks and she did submit on time.
Okay. You weren't saying all the trustees, you're saying the admin, mayor, and attorney.
Yep.
Okay. And then on the inquiries and corrections, do you want that to the mayor and the admin?
That should be to both of you, the admin and the mayor.
Okay.
I agree with all those suggestions. Thank you.
Yeah. And then those will be forwarded to us, or are they do
you know if Molly, I'm sorry, Trustee Barella, does this version
Mine is
match what you had before? Because all of the references were just updated. There wasn't any like revision to these references to reduce references to like the attorney and the mayor or the administrator. So I just want to make sure we're actually working from the final version that was used in 2019, and that there weren't other updates that we also would need to capture.
No, because I went through it with Kelly, and that was just one of the things. And we had made that decision. Oh, good Lord. It should be in the meeting packet. I mean, it was literally kind of a spur of the moment, because we also then went over where it was going to be advertised, because that was another big issue that we had. Was we had questioned, like I said before in another meeting, we were told it was being advertised like the town of Silverton's LinkedIn, and then you went to LinkedIn and the town of Silverton didn't even have its own page. So it was
still doesn't.
shared by somebody who had something. And so there was this massive disconnect. So that's why we started putting as many layers in as possible to make sure things got fielded correctly. Because you've got to remember, Paul had just come on right after we started we'd gotten him. And so there was a lot of things that we were doing that he wasn't included on, because he was just really brand new to having the whole thing start. He was just learning the way we did things, and it was, we'll see what happens. So the next major big concern is, where are we advertising? So this is what we did last time. Go ahead.
So I believe that Anthony has a list prepared by Community Relations Manager Branner with her suggested at least initial scope. Anthony, do you have that list in front of you?
I don't right now. I'll try to get it here in a moment.
I can open it real quick. I was copied on that email. But so the initial list includes the Colorado Municipal League, the Colorado Association of Ski Towns, Downtown Colorado Inc., and then Indeed and Glassdoor, which are both recruiting platforms, Government Jobs, which is another recruiting platform, and it's the only one so far that I believe costs money, and it's $199 for 60 days. Another one called Zip Recruiter, and another one called LinkedIn, which, as Trustee Varela pointed out, we would actually need to claim the page as the town because no one has done that yet, which is probably a good thing for us to do anyway.
We also went so far as to put it in, I do believe, the Grand Junction paper, Durango, I want to say Albuquerque. Kelly should have been able to come up with a list of that, or possibly bills that we had, because we advertised quite wide and quite far. Sam Mamet, I believe, sent us some information on additional places that should be able to dug up in an email through Interim Administrator Hamilton, because he had other suggestions for both the attorney advertising and for the administrator advertising, being the head of the CML at the time.
Yeah, and were all of in the CML packet, they did list, there was a list of places to advertise as well. Were all of those listed, such as the International City Management Association and the National League of Cities? And I mean, there was 5 or 6 on the list in that packet.
That's a great suggestion. Anthony, can we add those to the list as well?
Sure. Tyler, Trustee George, you said the National League of Cities. What was the other?
The International City Management Association, but it's on page 10 of the CML packet.
Okay.
Do you have that packet, Anthony?
There's a list.
I don't have it in front of me right now.
Yeah, of course, but you have access to it.
Yes.
You know what he's talking about. Great.
Kind of along those lines too, I think there's another, I know we're not looking for a planner, but I don't know, when I scanned this website, American Planning Association, there were a variety of different, it wasn't just planner postings on that web, that's an organization, a professional organization. I just wondered if that is similar to the list in the CML packet. And then I also wanted to go back and ask Trustee Varela, or go back to Trustee Varela's earlier point about how the submissions are distributed to trustees. And is that something that we get like in a big bundle after a certain deadline, or do they get sent to us singularly as the submissions are made? Or is there a recommendation on that?
Trustee Barrella, go ahead.
Okay, so back to what Sally was saying first. A lot of the submissions that we do receive are from city planners who, that's the next typical step up, is to become an administrator, because you've already dealt with everything else that it takes. So that's a really good idea to put it into the professional planners page. And back to the other one, we made it come through individually. Every time we got a submission, they came through. Then, sorry, my phone at the brewery is ringing. It's the only place I have decent internet. And so when we went into it, Kelly could show you if you wanted to. All of those then were taken and put together in a nice pamphlet, printed out, so we could take it with us to the interviews. And then we went through every single one of them. I mean, they delineated them with like a purple page, and we had different names on each one of them. And we did the same thing for the town attorney as we did for the administrator. So, yep, there we go. And then she can show you page after page, and their letters of recommendation were in there, their everything. But the good thing is we got to review them instead of getting overwhelmed with 200 and 300 pages of documents. We got to look at them as they slowly came in. Then we went through, weeded them down, got to the 3 that seemed the most feasible, and then went forward with interviews. So that's all I got.
Yeah, you got it. That was really what I was getting at too, is if it, I don't know how it alters the process, but if it's possible, I think it would be nice to be able to review without it coming in just hundreds of pages all at once.
Can you just tease out that process for us on how you got to 3, Molly?
When all the deadline came in, we sat there and literally went into, I think we had to go in an executive session at that time, I do believe, because we had names and personnel information that weren't open to the public yet, if I remember correctly. And then we went through and we talked about what we liked about each one of them. And we started we actually had a number sheet. Kelly, do you have that number sheet that we did? The ranking sheet? I don't know if you can hear me. But there was a sheet of paper in there, and then, we could go through and this is what we liked, this is what we didn't. And I believe we had I wish I had my stuff with me. I actually don't have it with me right now because I'm at the brewery.
I'm looking for that sheet.
I want to say there was, I don't know, it was pretty thick. And then we discussed it. Who were our final picks? Who did we think was the best? One applicant had applied at a previous time. If any of you were on that community at large panel, I think Jim Harper and Anthony both were. You remember Adam, and then we had to announce them after we got done with the executive session. We announced our finalists. There might have actually been 5, and then we weeded it down to 3, the last 3 that we invited to come in. Then we had to go back to another executive session because we had to make decisions on whether or not we were going to accommodate some for some things, accommodate some for other things. We had to make a decision if the town was going to spend any money for hotels, motels, travel, what was, because one guy was supposed to be coming from Montana, and he was a no-show actually. He was in the finalist category. So, can you see it, Kelly?
Is this the one?
Yeah. Yep. So we did all of the hard work and all the legwork already, because we did, good Lord, I'd say we probably did in excess of 8 meetings, maybe, in reference to getting all of this together, to create a policy, to create a procedure, to create a correct advertising mechanisms, to make sure that we had, a way for us to look at each one of the participants or applicants, excuse me, and figure out how we wanted to move forward, who was the best, and whether they were at the end of the career, because that was most of them, with the exception of one gentleman. The others were kind of at their end of their career. So we get into that catch-22.
So to recap, so far I have adding the contact info through the second page. And Anthony, you have all of the updates that you need there and the information you need to make those revisions.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that we need to have the admin, mayor, and attorney on the inquiries, or the admin and the mayor on inquiries and corrections, and the admin, mayor, and attorney on that first introduction and on the submission date, location, and opening.
And then I have that we will share submissions when received rather than in bunches or following the deadline. I also have the note that we'll expand the advertising list to include everything from the CML packet, as well as the suggestion that Mayor Pro Tem Barney made about the planner resource. And then I think, is the policy and procedure document for how this goes once submissions come in included in the folder that we all have access to, the Google Drive folder, or is that just a hard copy that we need to share still?
I remember correctly, we hashed that out verbally. I'd have to go through, remember that big old stack I showed you guys last time of paper that was about that thick? I'd have to actually go back through that and find it. And like I said, unfortunately, I did not bring it this evening, sorry.
All good. So then I guess the next question I have is to continue with the substance of the packet. And then once we're done talking about the substance of the packet, I would say we should have a conversation about the date deadlines that are included throughout, because that's the other bracketed blank. And then the other bracketed piece of information I saw in there was the salary band. So what other substantive comments or questions, revisions, redactions does anyone have in mind?
Thought it looks really thorough and complete. On that note, I didn't have anything substantive to add.
My only question was who makes up the initial review panel that's separate from the town board? It's mentioned in there. The town of Silverton, and a separate initial review panel.
Great question.
Applications will be reviewed by the town board of trustees and a separate initial review panel. That was.
Trustee Brella, how did we do that last time?
We all came to a conclusion at a meeting and said who we wanted to be on that board. Jim, you were actually there, and so was Anthony, I believe, Kim White, Deanne Gallegos. Who else did we bring in?
Patrick Rondinelli, I do believe, was there as well, to have a DOLA representative there.
Yeah.
And I would recommend that at least you consider to have Patrick there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he helped organize the citizens panel where we did our own slightly different thing at town hall. And then we scheduled the one, and then we would see one, and then that person would then go to Kendall and back and forth. Obviously, I don't know how that's going to happen in the Zoom world, but hopefully by then we will have the Zoom room set up.
Yeah. It was very helpful to do that, and people could come in and they would go one after another all day long. In fact, I think we did it over 2 days, is my recollection, but
to what extent was staff involved in the interview process?
only, go ahead.
I was gonna say,
I
not, you
think-
don't get to hire your own boss.
Yeah, there was coordinating. I think that that was the extent, is my recollection. It was just coordinating, making sure that, you know, the people knew where to be if there was a delay, that they were taken care of, in the sense of didn't feel like they were, you know, whipping in the wind. But staff didn't. I don't recall that. Then acting administrator Hamilton was involved. I don't, and the scoring. Do you remember?
No, because you don't get to hire your own boss. It's basically what it is. Because she was acting administrator, but she was also the town clerk and treasurer at the time. So there was a massive conflict there. And so we were utilizing outside resources from the direct community to get their feeling, to see, you know, because yeah, there was one that everybody had the same feeling about. And so it validated everybody's thoughts, I guess is the best way to say it.
I'd be interested in exploring the pros and cons of there being a staff interview panel as well. Most of the companies that I've been included in the past, obviously like the partner level or senior people make the ultimate decision, but they've always included the junior staff as well to get feedback. And I'd be a proponent of that. Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
So is this just process question? Is this something that are we working through not just the RFP and that document, but like we're going from RFP through the whole process tonight to hiring? That's the goal of this work session?
I mean, the goal of the work session was just to go through the RFP. As long as we have enough time to get through the RFP as well as talk about this other stuff, I think we're being efficient. But I guess thank you for that. Maybe we should be back on track to focusing on the RFP. And then if we have extra time, we can go on to the process. Trustee Harper?
Thank you, sir. That may work in the private sector, but being able to interview your own boss in the public sector is I do not believe it's going to work. I've seen it in Bryson City, North Carolina, when I worked closely with them, a town comparable to our size, maybe twice, 3 times our size. It doesn't work. I'm just going to politely disagree.
Sure. I'd love for you to expand on why it doesn't work, if we want to continue on the tangent. And I'm open to either direction, either coming back to this later or continuing on it now.
We can continue later on. I mean, we can get into it now if you'd like, but I'm
good either way.
I disagree. I don't think hiring your boss, it works in any way, shape, or form. That's just me.
Right, and I totally respect that. And I said I'd like to explore the pros and cons, but I'd love to hear why, as opposed to just the blanket statement that it doesn't.
From my experience, my interpretation, when the employees get to pick their own boss, you don't necessarily get the best one. You get the one that they like the most, who might be the nicest or the easiest to work with, not the most efficient or effective.
That's a great point. Thank you. I would also, I think that maybe having them as a panel for input wouldn't necessarily be the, ultimate decision, but it might be helpful feedback. If, we were all very excited about one particular candidate and every single staff member had an issue, that would be a good thing to flag. But I think you made a very good point. So thank you. Trustee Barella?
So back to the actual RFP. Everything in the compensation and benefits package, that's it. That was the range from before to what the highest dollar value we figured we could pay. Everything was depending on your experience, and we had some less experienced people the last couple of searches that range was too low for. So we have to keep that in mind, because we don't have a lot more that we could give. So, and then if you add in the amount of you know, the 401 and the insurance and everything like that, it gets to be up there pretty big. 64 was just basically the absolute bare minimum. So it's truly not probably feasible to put somebody in at that amount right now. So if we wanted to take that out and maybe bump it up, I would be okay with that, because 64 seems, I mean, especially in 2021, it seems like you're not going to get anybody that would even apply based on that rate.
Do you have a number in mind?
I'd probably say about 75 personally, because basically that's what the clerks is, plus the extra 20 that we give when we give interims. So within that range, I think is a good scope to start, and that is for somebody with experience. Somebody with amazing experience, obviously we can go more, up to the 108. I mean, as far as contracts, because the negotiation of the contracts is where it all comes down to.
Anthony, would you be able to work with Clerk Freeze or John Ryder to just confirm that we can fit in our budget an adjustment up? And I would say that if we're going to adjust the bottom up 11,000, we should do something similar with the top end if we're trying to adjust based on like a 2-year time period and what the current market is. So it sounds like that would be something in the ballpark of 75 up to 120. And then come back to us and tell us if that's not feasible.
Yeah, we can look into that. I want to go look at the handbook to see if that position's in there, and I mean, it's easier to take the lower up than it is the upper up if it's in the handbook. And if we're going to do that, we probably need to look at the handbook and see how that plays out. But yes, Mayor Furman, I'll work with Clerk Freeze on that.
Yeah, Barney?
I agree. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just calling on you late.
Okay. I agree that if that works with our budget, making that adjustment makes sense, and being willing to pay for quality and experience is important. So I support that. Anecdotally, I spoke with a friend of mine who's been a town administrator in towns outside of Portland, Maine, and then is just connected with Maine rural towns. And as an anecdotal example, he thought, don't go be a town administrator in rural Maine, I guess is the bottom line here. He thought $65,000 was about on par with what a plant administrator in a rural town in Maine would be paid. So I guess Colorado is a better paying state in that department. So then I did actually do a little research to see what came up, you know, if I clicked on administrator positions, and it looked like our range fit with a lot of the positions that were posted around the country.
Clerk Freeze?
I looked at the job description in the handbook for administrator, and there's no salary or anything in there at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there a separate reference for class 6 employees somewhere else that isn't specific to the administrator? I just want to make sure that we don't miss a reference and then have an admin foot fault.
I'll look here and find it.
Sure. Thank you. Do we want to talk about dates? Would it be helpful to work backwards from our target deadline and see if it's feasible to fit things within there, or if we need to go beyond that? And Anthony, if you could lead this part of the conversation, I think that would be very helpful.
Sure. So if we look back, it seems in an ideal world that I would be able to be with the individual for at least a couple of weeks, although there's great staff here that can do that transition. If you go from there, you would choose sometime in the first week of June, or right at the second week, they would be here. If you go back from that time, you know, and I'd like feedback on this. I've seen everything from 2 weeks to 2 months for somebody to transition. Molly, do you remember what it was for Lewis?
No, Lewis was hired just right before I got on board.
Okay.
So, but you were only dealing with, once again, an interim.
Right.
So there was no transition. There was no transition from Gardner. There was no transition from Carlson. You've got to think that these all came to very abrupt endings. So I can't tell you when the last time, other than Mr. Ryder, has anybody even volunteered to help segue to the next, to make sure that the information was usable and just, you know, easily accessible. And I'm actually more for moving the date, so at least we can get a bunch of submissions, more like to around April 15th, so that way the 19th meeting, we could start planning for our interviews and, you know, or start planning what we think are the best, because you want to push this as far out there as you can. It's already the 8th, and if we put a deadline on the 31st, are we hitting all the markets right? Because I do believe we had to advertise something twice.
Are you saying to advertise almost immediately and have it do the April 15th?
Yeah, so if we start getting everything ready, if staff can have it ready and ported and available to upload, just say by the 15th, we give it 1 month worth of submission time. That gives us all the way to around April 15th. That would give staff the next 5 days to make sure that they could hit all of these sites and start advertising it. And then that puts us at around April 15th, where we should have a deadline. We'd be getting these things rolling in. I think the last time we had maybe 2 or 3 come in right at the very end. And we didn't have any late submissions. But most of the rest of them, they came through, they kind of rolled through slowly over that whole month. And so we were able to really disseminate all the information quickly when it came down to weeding them down and who did we think was the best candidate. And then we could do that on the meeting on, or a special meeting on the 19th, and then have on the 26th, April the 26th, be able to say that we were going to have a meet and greet with all of the candidates and bring them in, and then do, sorry, am I putting that the other way around? I know what I'm talking about. I just can't think of my order right now. So that way we can do the interviews and then the meet and greets with all the different candidates.
So on the April 19th special meeting, can you just clarify what you think? Is that for us to winnow down who we're going to have at the meet and greet?
Yep.
That's to narrow it down to 3 or 5, whatever's decided, right? Okay.
Yep. And that gives everybody an extra 4 days in case we have any really late submissions. That gives everybody just like a normal packet from the 15th to the 19th to read them in case there's anything else and start comparing and contrasting. And hopefully by then we'd be able to all meet in person. I don't know, somebody's going to have to clarify whether or not. I do believe we had to go to executive session because of the personnel matter with the names and the disclosures. So, but somebody else can verify that. Because now I just honestly don't remember, because we had so many meetings in reference to getting this right.
Yeah, I remember us going when we were talking about potential contractual relations. I don't remember just talking about it, but I'll need to look that up. I don't know off the top of my head right now.
Can I ask a date question? Oh, Clerk Freeze, are you ready? Did you want to share what you found?
Yeah, so I found it says $30.87 to $50 $52.01 for hourly compensation.
Say those numbers again.
So I just flop my page. $30.87 to $52.01.
That's our range right now. It's $104,000 a year. So what's it take to change that?
So that's lower than the upper bracket.
It is.
Sorry, Mayor, go ahead. What's it take?
Well, except for if you're saying that it's more than 40 hours a week and that it's more like a 45 or 50-hour week. I mean, there is room for leeway there if you get technical in the whole thing.
Yeah, so if we called it a 50-hour week job, that brings it up to $130,000 a year. So I guess it depends on how this board's interpreting that.
Yeah, but as soon as you offer someone's salary, it's salary. You don't change it to an hourly compensation after that.
Yeah, I think you're right, Trustee Barrella. Even though it's a class 6, it's not under an hourly, it's under a salary. If you put it under hourly, it would need to fall into that category.
So can we get feedback from council on what the specific salary range limits are based on our current employee handbook and what the process would be if we do feel the need to revise it?
Yes.
Awesome. Mayor Pro Tem, did you have a date question?
Yeah, I was going to go to dates, but Trustee Barrella, if you have a salary, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I want to listen to your date.
Well, it's more of just a question about, let's see. So my question is that I agree that we need to give candidates enough time to be able to submit and do a good job of it. My only question is that we had discussed doing this sort of as a initial search process, and depending on what sort of results we got from working in-house, we may explore the idea of contracting with a firm of some sort. And I just wanted to know, like, how would we overlay that decision? Because I think the 15th sounds like the latest, and if we just committed to an in-house search, that makes sense. That flows really well, I think, and then into the 19th and the 26th. But I'm just wondering if our initial in-house search doesn't get what we need or doesn't feel complete, that might be a little bit late to then engage a firm. That's a question.
I think that's a good question. My perspective is that if we shorten the response time, then we're less likely to be successful with this. And the goal, I guess, would be to be successful with this initial search and not need to go to a search firm, and that would be a last resort. So it would not be great to undermine the likelihood of success of this initial search. That said, what does everyone think about trying to shorten up a little bit and making it exactly a month? So if we were to put this out tomorrow or the next day, we could have, you know, like an April 9th or 10th deadline and just move it up a week. Or do you think, Anthony, that we need the full week to get this finalized, put it out around Friday, and then that still would be a month if we're going to like the 15th?
Well, there's a couple things. One, I think that we're missing one of the trustees. And I think we need to let them know what we're doing. We need to get with Paul about changing that salary if everybody's comfortable with it. I also think that we need to have a special meeting, and what we're going to put out needs to be voted on.
Trustee Barrella?
Yeah, Anthony's right. We need to definitely have Paul engaged in this. As to, you never make a decision or, you know, in the work session, obviously, you only can come to a consensus. And if so, that's why I was saying that gives the week of time, because we can take this and move it to the next agenda, which is in, I don't know how many minutes, in 15 minutes, and we can add it in as an item, because I do believe the RFP was in the packet. So it has been available for the public to see. Any little nuances that we decide we want to change, we can do it now. Asking Paul, getting back to us, it can take, as long as it's noticed for a day. I mean, we can have another special meeting, because we're in the Zoom world now. We're not meeting in person. So if we need to do it, just say by Friday, and Lisa and Kelly and Nate have every single one of those avenues ready to advertise in, and we come up with a finalized submission. We can call a quick meeting Thursday, put out the, the agenda for it, go in Friday and approve the RFP, and boom, it's advertised. So that's not that hard for all of us to come together, and we can even be on the phone. You don't actually have to be it, as long as we have all seen the final product for the decision that we're making, or not the decision, for the consensus that we're coming to right now.
I think one of the questions though was, do you want to shorten it from 30 days as well? And I don't think we do we?
No, I think that was a great set of reasons. I'm glad we considered it. So it sounds like the target is, it sounds like we can probably revisit this during the meeting tonight, most likely get to an approval decision subject to a couple of things to be confirmed, so it can be conditionally approved, so that we don't necessarily need to have another meeting in order for this to be finalized and published, if we can get there in tonight's meeting. And then we can have a submission deadline of April 15th, and a plan for the board to have a special meeting possibly on the 19th, although I believe we already have a meeting scheduled that night, in order to select finalists and set up schedules for interviews. And then what time period do you think we would need to put between that and the meet and greet? That seems like it'd probably need to be at least a week, if not longer, so that people can make travel plans and things like that. So we say like May 3rd for the finalist meet and greet. Or does that not give enough time for interviews? Trustee Barilla and Trustee Harper?
I'm wondering if Kelly, because I don't want to screw up my video, I wonder if Kelly can do a little research, or Lisa might even know what the dates were that we used last time. And so that way we can see the time frame that we put on ourselves. I just hate to dig up through my emails, because I might lose.
I think I have the last packet. Let me take a quick look. Trustee Harper, why don't you go ahead while I'm looking?
Thank you, sir. I just feel like we're rushing this, and I don't see what's the problem of why we can't string it out a little bit more. Mid-May or end of May. That was going to be my comment.
Are you Trustee Harper, are you referring to the selecting the finalists, or are you referring to the finalist meet and greet and scheduling interviews?
Overall,
okay.
I feel like we're really rushing this process and cramming it down our throats, and I feel like the process took a little bit longer last time than we're giving it this time. And I'd like to definitely go back and see dates, because maybe I'm incorrect, but I don't think I am.
So I have those in front of me now. I don't know when the packet was distributed initially, so that's the one piece that I'm missing. But the submissions were due March 15th, 2019. The town board selected finalists and scheduled interviews March 29th, so 2 weeks later, 2019. And then finalist meet and greet was 2 weeks following that on April 12th, 2019. So there were 2 week gaps between each set of dates.
Yeah, I was going to say that's about right, because it took us about 2 weeks to go through everything, make all the meetings, post everything, make sure, everything was legal and right. So That does sound about right. It was a total of approximately 2 months from the time we put out the initial RFP to the date of submission to meet and greet.
So the difference between what we just talked about and that would be moving the second set of dates instead of the submission date being April 15th and then having the finalists selected and scheduled interviews on the 19th, we would have a special meeting on the 26th instead. And then we would have the final meeting as a special meeting on May 10th for the meet and greet, if we wanted to follow the same time periods. Trustee Brella?
I'm looking at a calendar. Our regular meeting is on the 19th, you mean?
Right, our regular meeting's on the 19th, but if we wanted to follow the gaps previously by having 2 weeks between each set of dates, then if we were going to have the submission on the 15th, instead of having that second date be 4 days later on the 19th, we would have it on the 26th.
Yeah, or we could even move the submission date to the Friday cutoff being Friday the 16th at 5 p.m. And then it's literally 10 days only in between that and the 26th, where we could schedule a special meeting, whittle down our finalists, and then 2 weeks later, somewhere around the 10th, do the meet and greet. I think those are good timelines.
Yeah. And I think as rigorous as that meeting schedule will be, to have meetings on the 19th, 26th, 3rd, and then 10th, and then 17th. So pretty much every Monday for 5 weeks in a row. I do think in terms of productivity, we'd be setting ourselves up for success to have the regular meetings in between all those special meetings to cover anything that came up in between, so that we didn't have a 2-week gap throughout the process where we didn't get to meet. But that is rigorous.
No, what was rigorous was getting to the point that we made the RFP that you see in front of you now. That took literally probably a total of, I don't know, 5-7 meetings to whittle it down to where we actually had something that we thought was a working document that coincided with actually what the handbook said and everything else that was missing from the scope of all the other ones. So this is easy in comparison.
Well, I'm very grateful for the past board for doing that work so that we can tee it up with an already very good piece of work product. So yeah, Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Okay, just back on the dates. I guess I'm wondering, so it sounds like in the past there have been maybe a handful, so 2 or 3 or 5 candidates. And let me just clarify the process of how those get whittled down to the finalists, because it seems like to go from 3 or 5 down to, you know, who's being interviewed and who's meeting and greeting is less cumbersome than, like, let's just imagine that we have 15 candidates. I just want to, I'm not sure how that works and what the process is there, and then how we use those 2 weeks in between efficiently, and giving enough time for interviews. Because then I wonder, you know, like, I'm willing, I think one candidate preparing their submission, having 4 weeks to do that sounds very reasonable to me. And then it, depending on what kind of submissions we get, I think that varies our workload in that next 2 week period. So I just was trying to think through that a little bit. And did we already review who does that and how?
Trustee Brella.
So we had said the same thing last time, Sally, that because you don't know the volume of submissions that you're going to get. So that's why we had 3 people looking at those emails to make sure that if one of them saw it, then they tag everybody immediately, and you've got 3 different people sending them out, because, you know, somebody might be busy and didn't get to the email, and, you know, that's how things get overlooked. So making sure that we get them when they roll in was so important and vital to us last time, because it does give you time to read it, and you're not going through a 200-page document at the very end. So as you read them, you use the little score sheet that we created, and then you can put that all down. And then when the next one comes in, do it all. So we've done our due diligence before we get to that 2-week time frame. And I do want to say, I think there might have been 2 that came in right there at the very, very last. But whittling it down was actually an easier process than you think, because it was based on the letters of recommendation and what their prior work experience was, because you can really start to vet that out almost immediately. And then submitting, then telling people once they became a finalist, then we would go through a background check, because you're dealing with, granted our budget's small, but you're still dealing with money. You're dealing with millions of dollars. You're dealing with HR problems, and you don't want somebody who had a lawsuit, 2 states ago in a different thing, having an HR lawsuit and having an issue coming to you without disclosure. So it was pretty easy to kind of whittle them down, just for historical perspective.
Great, thanks. And so is that, how do we get to the finalist? Is that Anthony who's going through them and whittling them down, or are we doing that as trustees and they come out on the scorecard a certain way and that's how we get there?
That's the April 26th. You all talk and negotiate amongst yourselves of how many people you want. I mean, I think it could come in a lot of different ways. It could be, there's 4 people on the board that have different people they definitely want. So there you have that are different, and maybe you all agree we're going to do that and that fits, but you'll winnow it down amongst each other. I mean, the idea of going through more than 5 or 6 interviews, if you have 5 or 6 candidates and going through all that, is not going to be really exciting to you. You're going to probably rather tease that out based upon what you know already. I mean, one of the flip side of that is some people interview really great, and but you're not going to want to interview 15 people. But it is going to be the board that's going to decide who they want as finalists.
And there are going to be people who maybe look great on paper and then interview terribly. I think
oh yeah, that will happen.
That did happen.
Yeah.
So
Happen.
sorry to interrupt. We have 4 minutes before the normal meeting starts. Do we want to take a break and then revisit this when we get to continued business in this topic? Or do we want to push straight through? I just want to double check with everybody.
I'd like to take 2 minutes, but if you want to go through, we can.
I'm good with that.
Trustee George, did you have something burning and relevant to?
No.
Do that real quick.
We can wait.
Okay, so when we come back to this, I think this was a super productive hour. Thank you, everybody. Why don't we start with Administrator Edwards providing a summary of the updates to the document that was included in the packet, along with the conditions to approval in terms of what needs to be reviewed and updated based on the attorney. And then let's spend the rest of that time talking about the rest of the process questions that we had. And I think it would also be helpful for someone to provide an overview of the anticipated process so that all the members of the public that join us for the full meeting can kind of get up to speed on what we just talked about. Does that sound good to everybody? Okay, awesome. So let's take a 3-minute break and be back at 7 to start the regular meeting. Thank you.
Gage, welcome. Can you test your sound for me, please?
Testing, testing.
Perfect. Nathan will be doing most of the magic behind the scenes tonight, but I just wanted to pop in and check in with you and let you know that typically we ask folks to just shut their video and mute until it's their turn to speak, just to preserve bandwidth. So you'll be a little bit into the meeting, but not super late in the meeting. So bear with us. We'll get to you.
All right, when everybody returns to their computers, please turn your video on so I will know to start the meeting. We'll give Jim just another minute. All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. It is 7:03 p.m. on March 8th. This is the regular meeting of the Silverton Board of Trustees, and I call this meeting to order. Clerk Freeze, roll call, please.
Trustee Varela,
Here.
trustee Harper,
Here.
trustee Beerma,
Here.
trustee George,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Here.
Mayor Furman.
Here. Administrator Edwards, would you like to lead the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, please join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. For the public joining us, we just completed a very productive work session relating to the town administrator RFP, and we will provide a summary of that later on during continued business. So we are now in our regular meeting, 7 p.m. First agenda item, staff and/or board revisions to the agenda. Administrator Edwards, do you have any agenda revisions?
I do not. I do want to point something out that we'll be talking about later. There was a error in the Mullis Lake agreement on page 51, which is page 3 of 6. That is, it says the town also agrees to pay the contractor $500 for February and $750, and then it says $500 for February and $750. That was a copy paste mistake on my part. That'll be changed later. I just wanted to make that clear. We can talk about it again at that point.
Thank you. Trustees, any revisions to the agenda? All right. So at this time, we're going to open up the meeting to public comment. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. If you would like to make a public comment, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, and we will promote you to panelist. All right, seeing no public comments, we're going to move on to presentations and proclamations, with the first item being Parklets update by Todd Bove.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do public comment from Jimmy Keene.
Oh, wonderful.
And Jimmy, if you should have the floor.
Can you hear me okay? Outstanding. Okay, over the last year, I've heard more and more chatter around Kendall Mountain expansion, both in person and on social media. For the most part, I have ignored it, but recent events has forced me to dig further to find out what all the chatter was about. Being an individual that seeks hard facts over hearsay, my first reading was titled Kendall RPP, Final Application for Transfer of Title, updated on 11 May of 2020. It clearly lays out a plan and proposed improvements to include Kendall, proposed to Kendall to include parking lot improvements, installation of concrete ADA ramp, grading, ice rink resurfacing and sideboards, dirt work for terrain park and tubing hill, fat bike tubing hill, grooming equipment, disc golf, signage, snowmaking, and night lighting. The estimate for these improvements and additions was $200,500. This led me to the next document titled Kendall Mountain Recreation Area Viability Assessment prepared by the SE Group. I will say I was floored when I read this document, which sounded more like a KMPD or a Kendall Mountain pipe dream. 800 acres of skiing compared to the 16 we have today. As a reference, Aspen only has 673 acres. 1,000 skiers per day versus the 300 we have now on the weekend. A ski lodge 10 times the size we have now at up to 30,000 square feet. A restaurant that seats 200. Pergy's at Purgatory has a capacity of only 180. A 4,000 square foot maintenance building, 3 acres of parking, approximately 520 additional rooms beyond the city's current hotel capacity of 146 rooms. All when the city has a serious, massive housing problem. The $25 million price tag would hang over our city like a dark cloud for 20 years with an annual payment of $1.7 million before we broke even and started making a profit. What would be impacted by such a pipe dream proposal? The area for hard rockers, wildlife, and beavers in the area, the entire eastern half of Kendall defaced forever, to name a few. I met a teacher at Crested Butte over Christmas who commutes from Gunnison as they cannot afford to live in the town they teach in. A restaurant encourages $1,000 tips to help the workers with the insanely expensive rent, and that's when they can even find a place to stay. Most commute on the Gunnison Crested Butte shuttle, which runs all day. I will end my 3 minutes with 4 simple questions for the board. Why are we spending time and money on the pipe dream if the Kendall RPP has already clearly let out the expansion? Why are we working on a proposal which includes BLM land the town doesn't even own? What happens if the town can't afford to pay the $25 million loan? And lastly, but most importantly, where is the study, countless hours spent, and progress made on an affordable housing solution for the very citizens that make up this town and run it, who each of you were elected to look after their best interest? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keene. I think you timed yourself very perfectly. I would recommend also that you attend the Kendall Mountain Committee meeting that's coming up this week. Mayor Pro Tem Barney, do you know the date of that?
It's tomorrow at 6 o'clock. It's a specific meeting for feedback on the RFP. I was going to give that in the committee update, but tomorrow's meeting is sort of a specific purpose, but they're typically Tuesdays at 3 o'clock.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Keene. Those are
Mayor Furman,
helpful.
I'm sorry. Tomorrow's meeting isn't at 3 o'clock, though. Trustee Barney.
Yeah, sorry. Tomorrow's meeting is at 6 o'clock. And the purpose of that meeting is to receive feedback on the request for proposal document.
All right. Any other public comments? I imagine in the last few minutes, someone would have put their hand up if there were. So we can move on to the parklets update from Todd Bove.
Good evening, everyone. Mayor and trustees. Following the discussion at last week's board meeting, staff continued research related to potential options for the accommodation of outdoor dining in the downtown area. Given the parameters discussed at the last meeting, we requested an updated formal quote for the purchase of 10 outdoor parklets. Upon review of the estimates, it would stand to reason that the purchase of these units is likely cost prohibitive. The variance from initial estimates can be attributed to fluctuation in the price of raw steel and the demand for the units as we get into spring. That being said, I do still feel we have some viable options and alternatives we can pursue, but it probably does warrant further discussion as far as how we would like to proceed. I would be happy to answer any questions related to the parklets or outdoor dining.
Trustee Harper.
Thank you, sir. The fluctuation in cost, that included the 50-50 split where CDOT was going to share with us the cost of each unit.
There was no 50-50 split. The match for the CDOT grant was 10%. So if we were to request from the CDOT grant up to $50,000, our match would be $5,000.
I beg your pardon. I wrote that down incorrectly. So yes, I can see why. Thank you, sir. That was my only comment.
Sure. If the board doesn't have any specific questions, I would be happy to discuss viable alternatives or provide any additional information for how we may kind of look forward and proceed.
Yeah, Trustee Barella, go ahead.
Oh, no, this was excellent, Todd. This was a way different perspective than what I had gotten, but granted, that was over a year ago, or just about a year ago, excuse me, from Parklets. So good job on that. Yeah, that does not seem close to feasible or reasonable in any way, shape, or form for a $5,000 match for the town of, for the CDOT grant. I was hoping we could use it, but if we were looking at investing in 10 to make sure it was shared evenly to all those who are interested. So I like your breakdown of the barricades. How many people, can you tell me, last year did not receive barricades that ask? I only had to lend out our personal ones to 2 locations. So do you know?
If I recall correctly, we were able to accommodate with borrowing your barricades, everyone that requested to be in the program. I don't think we actually denied anybody from participating, to my knowledge.
Okay, so if then we take away the pallet that that I own, that was the loans for myself and funnel cakes that had requested them, and they borrowed them, obviously myself from me. So I freed up everything for town. So would it behoove us then to do that, to make sure that we do cover like the loan spur and I mean, I don't know, did anybody else put in a request that didn't get them? Because I'm under the impression that one group did and didn't have any barricades left over. Am I wrong?
I don't recall, but I thought we accommodated everyone who wanted to participate in the program. I apologize if I'm overlooking a business, but it may be beneficial for us to get an actual count before we place an order so we can ensure we are accommodating everyone interested. you know, there was a level of sticker shock, I think, when we got the estimates, because it was nearly 40 or 50% higher than those numbers I had seen. I think they were the same numbers Trustee Barella had seen. And, you know, supply chains, there's a pretty drastic variance. It's pretty volatile. So looking forward, you know, I think it would be my recommendation that we purchase more event barricades. I think it gives us the greatest amount of cost benefit. I don't think they're that unsightly, especially if everyone's using the same event barricades. There still is a level of cohesion, and that investment, as you can see in your packets, is right around $12,000. So pretty good bang for our buck. And also, you know, we can use them outside of outdoor dining to just better support events, winter events. They kind of have a double purpose. So.
Todd, I just want to continue on that thought. If we are going to have events this summer, which there is some discussion about, we'll have to see, but and also use the barricades and the with our establishments, we probably are going to need more than we have right now, based upon my discussions with Todd.
Lisa?
Yeah, if I could weigh in on that, we are definitely seeing event applications coming in. If you've looked at the agenda, you see that we have the Iron Horse on tonight's agenda. And there will be some additional applications coming in the coming months. So if we are going to utilize barricades for businesses, I would highly recommend that the town invest in some additional ones for special event coverage. They have been really excellent. Those metal barricades are so much better than the wooden ones that we have. And I can see a definite use and need for them this summer.
If I may chime in again, we do have a couple of ways we could pursue funding for these barricades. If they're directly related to outdoor dining, we could potentially utilize coronavirus relief funds, which is a reimbursement from the county. That would be specific to outdoor dining. If we wanted to write a CDOT grant specifically for outdoor dining, that grant is prepared. It would just be a matter of requesting the amount under $50,000 to accommodate the amount of barricades we would need. I think we would have to discern which barricades were being used for outdoor dining versus events in order to have those purchases qualify. But we may want to make a small investment on behalf of the town in event barricades and then request CDOT or CVRF funding to fund the outdoor dining program. And the match is 10%, like we said on the CDOT grant. So even if we were to attempt to purchase, say, $15,000 worth of barricades specifically for outdoor dining, that match would only be $1,500. And that grant is prepared by staff and basically ready to go with the boards. Go ahead.
Thank you, Director Bove. Trustee Barella?
So it doesn't exclude, to clarify, in the grant proposal from CDOT, you can use barricades. It doesn't have to be the parklets, as long as it's used for outdoor dining, correct? Just clarify for me, Todd.
Sure. My interpretation of the language in the grant is that any expenditure that promotes or supports outdoor dining would be considered a qualified expenditure.
Okay. Thank you. I'm glad to know that we've got applications. And since we have Gage Siffy here with us tonight, we need to thank him and Iron Horse for the initial barricades that we do have. Maybe he might actually have a better source or a little bit more information, if we can source them better when we get to his event.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Okay, so something that I did like about the parklets, but they're obviously ridiculously priced right now. But is what you mentioned, Todd, in your report of just creating the uniform look, and they just were really aesthetically nice. I like the idea of just the downtown beautification component of that. And I was wondering if there's a possibility to include in if there's COVID money or some COVID support, along with the barricades would be like, I mean, I hate to even throw out the word planter because I know they're so tricky, but I don't know if there's like some other feature that we could, I don't know, just sort of take the barricades a notch up.
Sure, and I think that would be at the board's will, imposing some form of design standard. 80 planters, I imagine, would be a pretty significant expense. Event barricades are actually rather affordable, and they do kind of have this dual purpose. Planters would require a significant amount of storage.
Yeah, no, let me just stop you there. I don't want to suggest what that would be. Like, planters came to my mind, but I just mean like, I don't know how to make the barricades more aesthetically pleasing, but if we're headed down the barricade road, I liked what we were discussing in the parklets is just, they have an aesthetic look. It creates uniformity, and it, you know, does something more for the downtown than just the event barricades. But I don't know what that, I don't mean to suggest the idea.
So my initial reaction to that would be, if you looked at the Brown Bear last summer, we allowed them to place some trees and plants kind of at the corners of their barricades, and the board could opt to maybe relax some of the design standards currently in place to accommodate, you know, maybe the placement of trees or plants in the public right of way as well, kind of between barricades. And I think that is a really easy way for us to maybe hide the steel barricades and make you look at something a little more attractive and draw the eye somewhere else.
Todd, maybe something we could do and bring back to the board, obviously, is look at expanding, maybe using one of the barricades that we were talking about, see what we have left over after we make sure all the business community we have enough to the business community. But if we were to expand something that could be used for our events that the town would own, for not for necessarily leasing out, and look at it. I'm not saying that we buy it right now or anything, but we could actually just explore what that looks like and how that might work in the future.
Mm-hmm. And for the sake of presenting all the options, there are decorative barricades. They come at a significantly higher price tag. I believe the estimate we received is somewhere between $93,000 and $107,000 for those. They're raw steel. You choose the insert material, whether it be corrugated or wood. If we were to pursue a CDOT grant for the maximum amount, which would be $50,000 with a $5,000 match from the town, and then utilize the entirety of the remaining coronavirus relief funds, that still kind of leaves us with a $30,000 gap to fill. And it's certainly an option to consider, but I do think that the best bang for my recommendation, at least, would be that we do something a little more affordable where we get that value back, like event barricades.
I didn't see the order of the hands. So Trustee Brill and then Trustee George.
So back to what Sally was saying and Todd was saying about loosening up our ability to decorate, I would definitely agree with that. I thought downtown Durango did some great jobs. I mean, some people put like Hawaiian skirts around there, like a grass skirt around the barricades. Other locations used hay bales. So if the town would loosen up as a collective, if this group, you know, makes a decision and says we will forego a section of an ordinance in order to beautify these things that, you know, individuals, then we could make it so you had to just kind of, I don't know, draw out what you were going to do to decorate it to make sure it kind of stayed within a scope. You know, however the board feels it, or let staff make those reversions first and then see if the board likes the idea, because we have to draw the exterior for the size and space and scope that we're going to use to create the bump outs anyway for the additional liquor licensing. So why can't we just layer it in there that we can, I don't know, draw what we think we would look pretty on it? I don't know, but I like where you're going with that, Sally, because I do agree. And I like the fact that if the town has extras, I don't have to use mine. And then we would have a uniform look completely up and down the street. So I like all the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee George?
Yeah, and Todd, I see that you have an estimate for how many we'll need for the businesses, but if we're having businesses and special events, do you have an estimate for how many we'll need for the special events on top of that?
I'm not sure the exact count that we have currently. I believe it's probably somewhere in the ballpark of 80. So this would be essentially doubling our current inventory, because
Okay.
we had every single barricade out last summer. And as we discussed earlier, Molly donated the use of some of her barricades, and I believe we were able to accommodate, if not all, there may have been one.
Okay, so that's in addition to our existing. Okay.
Correct.
And so the total cost for 80, Todd, will you remind us of that number?
I would have to reference the packet quick. There is a rather significant shipping fee, but I did get a quote on that was included.
Is that the $10,995 number?
I believe so, but let me verify that in the packet. It's whatever the packet states is the.
That's the 8.5 feet by 40 inches. Participating businesses 80 units. Total estimated expense, including the freight below, was $10,955.
Correct, and there is a volume discount on those units. So if we get over a certain number, I believe the price per unit drops about $13 per barricade. But that is the $10,955.05 would be 80 barricades delivered via freight, final cost.
Trustee Brella?
What other sources did you look at besides Uline? There's, I'm sure John Sites has catalogs, because I've seen them when we go to CML, the people that sell at a wholesale level to municipalities. Was that looked at all?
It was not. These were initial estimates. If we were going to pursue the event barricade option, I think we could potentially find a more value somewhere. I'd be happy to look into that. I was trying to provide an initial estimate. We could ideally choose a direction and go from there, but I would not be surprised if we could, with a little research or competitive shopping, find a slightly more attractive price per barricade.
Director Bove, do you have an idea of like when those could be delivered? I mean, are we running on a deadline based upon coming into the summer? I mean, do you anticipate they could be here if we table this till the next meeting and have a price for the trustees to make a motion on? Do you think that we could we can wait till then?
It would be my preference to, if we decide we're going to go the event of or with event barricades, I'd like to do some comparative shopping, make sure we're getting the best price, and come back to the board with those numbers.
Okay.
And Uline had quoted delivery at 7 days. So that's a significantly lower lead time than custom fabricated parklets. So if we are going to go the event route, let's make sure we're doing our due diligence, getting the best price. And I don't think there's a time constraint. We can have them well before May.
Trustee Brella?
Were we going to attach a monetary fee to any of the businesses that choose to use them to help offset the cost of the town?
I would defer to the board for that consideration.
So is it the direction of this board that the parklets are no longer within a reasonable price and that barricades are the best that we can do. And so we will ask Todd to come back to us with a specific proposal that's researched in terms of sources, the best possible price, taking into account shipping and quality and everything else. And for us to decide tonight or at that next meeting about how these will be administered and whether or not there'll be fees associated, or how would the board like to proceed on that portion of the topic? Todd?
I think there should also, if possible, be an additional consideration of how they would be funded. Would they be funded through utilizing the existing coronavirus relief funds? Would we like to apply for a CDOT grant, or would we like to find room in the Parks and Rec budget for their purchase?
I would like to ask that that be something that's recommended to the board by Administrator Edwards after looking at the budget and all other related costs. It seems like something that we would be kind of out of our element making that determination with the information we have. Trustee Brella?
Well, technically not. If we go, as long as it's within the scope of outdoor dining, Todd can utilize the grant. That's why I questioned that earlier. And if we have to pay for it out of Parks and Rec budget then, and we don't get the grants, then we should look at renting them to all the individual businesses, because we're taking dollar for dollar out of something that we don't have to accommodate. So I think that's a great direction. I think Todd should really try to get, if we can get it out of the coronavirus money, then and the CDOT grant, then you're not looking at an additional cost to the town of Silverton, with the exception of a potential matching grant, correct? Which we wouldn't even need 1,500 versus 5,000. So that's very minimal in so I like the idea of going for the grants first and trying to use the coronavirus money, because that's what's pushing restaurants outdoors to begin with. But if we have to go into the budget for it, then I think restaurants, we should all rent them.
Trustee George?
Should we make a consideration for if how much dining is, like, if all of the I guess regulations are still in place this summer? Like, if restaurants aren't allowed to have indoor dining, then should we propose that we have an administrative fee, but wait until those regulations on the amount of people you can have in indoor dining are gone? And that way we're giving the restaurants a little bit of a break, because if you guys aren't running at capacity, that's something that we might be able to do to at least help for the time being. And then hopefully once this pandemic is over, then we can go back to looking at charging a fee. But in the meantime, it might be helpful if you can't run at capacity already.
So I'm in favor of bump outs. I'm in favor of the town allocating some resources to facilitating the bump outs. I'm just thinking about this administratively, and then also the conversation we had last time around parklets, when those seemed more feasible, leveled the benefit a little bit between Green and Blair Street. And the barricades themselves don't necessarily have the same benefit to Blair Street with all the dust. So I just want to think a little bit more about what we can do to make sure that we're providing a benefit to all of the different businesses that this applies to. And then in terms of my suggestion that Administrator Edwards come back to us about how to fund it, I just want to make sure that there aren't other potential things that would have been funded by the COVID grant that we're choosing this over. And it just seems that the recommendation on how we fund this, and I agree with everything Trustee Brilla said in terms of it sounding reasonable, but if there's information we don't have that staff does have, I think it would be helpful for the board to receive a recommendation of how this is funded in terms of the best case scenario, and what if anything, we are choosing this over, so that we can make a fully informed decision. Director Bove?
for the purpose of the board, kind of having the full information, I don't feel there's any harm in applying for the grant if we can determine exactly how many barricades we'd like to purchase. We're not obligated to accept the grant until we enter into a contract with CDOT. So if that grant were awarded, at that point, the board could make a determination as to whether or not they would like to enter into that contract. If we can utilize CDOT grant funds, I think it would be in the town's best interest to keep those COVID relief funds unexpended in the event there were further purchases such as face masks, hand sanitizer, like all the other things we've purchased with those funds. So I don't feel there's any harm in seeing if we could fund this through CDOT and then bringing it back to the board for consideration or an approval prior to entering into that contract.
Sounds great. In addition to the research on where the best source for these might come from, would it be possible to speak with a couple of the Blair Street businesses to see if they have any requests or suggestions on how the bump outs could be best facilitated to be helpful for them as well? That's directed at Director Bove.
Oh, sure, it can be a little tricky to try and get a full consensus due to some businesses being open, some being closed. I'd be happy to go door to door, or if the board had a specific method they would like to try and reach out to each of those, we could certainly look at our business license list and attempt to contact all of them. But the participation and comment may be varied just based on the time of year. But I'd certainly be happy to attempt to do so.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't want to create a huge time-consuming task for you, but I would love to hear if there are ways that we could better serve the Blair Street businesses.
Sure.
Are you talking? Go ahead, Director Bove.
I was just going to state that I think we could certainly just look at which restaurants hold business licenses on Blair and either email or reach out by phone to contact them.
Can you clarify, Mayor Furman, are you referring to in the confines of the barricades or just in general?
The barricades. I mean, if we're going to spend taxpayer dollars or even grant funds available to the town that could be distributed for a variety of purposes, and they have a greater benefit to Green Street businesses than Blair Street businesses, I'd be interested to hear how we could perhaps adjust the plan to have an equal benefit to Blair Street businesses.
So that sounds
possible. It's a dusty street versus a paved street, so maybe it is what it is. But if there's a way that we can make it better, I'd love to hear ideas. Sorry to interrupt. Anthony?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Any other discussion on this topic? Or any other clarification needed from us for you, Director Bove or Administrator Edwards?
I understand what we need to do.
I think we have our...
Yeah.
Likewise.
I'm looking forward to our in-person meetings. All right. Well, thank you for all of that work, Director Bove. This is a very helpful update, and hopefully we're in a position to make a decision at the next meeting. So the next item on our agenda is the signage code update from Director Sites.
Good evening. Just a quick update on the sign code. Staff is working on a code amendment to look at businesses and even public entities that want to implement traffic control Specifically right now, we're talking about parking, places like the bank, in the post office that want to implement 15-minute parking, or the school that wants to implement staff parking. It gets really congested over there at times, but our current code doesn't handle this. The utility committee has been aware of this through several emails. I just wanted to give you an update that that's coming up. Staff is working on a draft of the amendment, and that'll go through after staff. Then the attorney will look at it, draft an ordinance that will go to the code committee for review. After that, planning commission, and then the town board will have to accept the ordinance, which will be, of course, the first reading and then approved a month later. But I just wanted you all to be aware that this is happening and be looking for it. We're trying to, this is one that we'd like to have in effect before the 1st of June and hopefully a little bit sooner than that. But we were hoping to get it to you sooner. So I just wanted to give you an update on it. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you. All right, moving along to new business. 4A, public hearing, Brown rezoning application, Lot 5, Scarborough re-subdivision, formerly lots 13 to 15, Block 75, 5th and Reese Street, Silverton, Colorado. And just as a quick reminder, since this is a public hearing, we'll hear a presentation of the decision in front of us or application by town staff, and I believe that'll come from Planner Adair. Then the applicant will be given an opportunity to continue the presentation or respond to any of the presentation materials. Then we'll have a period of public comment. We'll be able to ask questions throughout public comment. Then public comment will close. The trustees will then be able to continue the discussion and potentially make a motion and decision. So with that, we'll pass this over to Planner Adair.
Thank you. Well, you have a town rezoning application before you, which you can choose to conditionally approve or deny or table. The site is located at 5th and Reese. The applicant is Kirsten Brown. The site is vacant. The request is to rezone the site from R1 single family to R2 multiple family residential. What's proposed for the site is a proposed fourplex multifamily structure. The purpose is for long-term housing. The Planning Commission reviewed this application and they recommended that you consider approving this application with the 5 conditions of approval that are presented in the staff report. We have the application, the applicant is most likely present to answer any questions. We also received a last minute citizen comment from Melissa Childs. I let her know I would read her short statement to you. Dear trustees, please consider this my public comment regarding the Brown rezoning request on tonight's agenda. It seems the one thing our community can agree on.
Sorry to interrupt, but should we read that during the public comment period just so that everything's all together?
Sure, no problem.
Sorry. Thank you.
The Planning Commission and the Planning Department recommends that you consider approving this application, which would be rezoning from R1 to R2. And there's 5 conditions of approval on the last page of your staff report.
Thank you very much. And I see that we have Kristen Brown with us this evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me and thanks for your consideration on this. And Lisa covered it all. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you very much. So I guess we'll now go to public comment. Do you want to lead off, Planner Adair, with reading Melissa Child's comment?
Melissa Childs commented that it seems the one thing our community can agree on in entirety is the need for more workforce housing. The only way we are going to obtain more housing is through more dwelling units. Due to the scarcity of square footage within our town limits, density is the best hope for more dwelling units. The Brown project is in line with the existing density in the subject neighborhood. The subject zoning was originally platted as business auto, where multifamily development like the Browns project is a use by right. It was only converted to single family zoning through what could be viewed as shenanigans that benefited a single developer. I hope you will consider approving this rezoning for the benefit of our community as a whole.
Thank you. And now we'll open it up to public comment for those participating in the Zoom meeting. And I see at least one hand raised. So Jimmy Keene, the floor is yours.
Can y'all hear me? I got to ask every time just to make sure. Good. Okay.
We can.
Hey,
yeah.
hey, Miss Brown. First off, I want to commend you for realizing the housing issue that we have in this community. It makes me smile to see people trying to do things like this. My question though, and it's not to challenge you, but how can we be sure that this fourplex will remain a long-term rental versus the amount of cash you can easily get for a short-term over the summer? So, let's say you build it, it's sold to someone else. How can we make sure that it stays as a long-term? Is that in the code someplace? Thank you.
Yeah, Lisa could answer this too, but it's in the conditions of approval of this this request that we only be allowed to have one vacation rental permit for the whole fourplex. So the rest of them will be long-term.
Oh, I'm sorry. So
the rest of them. Okay.
So per the code, then it would be a maximum of one short term, and the other three would have to be a long-term rental, which I'm assuming a long-term is at least a year, 6 months to a year.
Well, per the town's own code. Shane, you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. So in the packet that we have, the proposal is that we condition the rezoning from R1 to R2 with that restriction. It wouldn't be specific to the code that any fourplex would only be allowed to have one. It'd be specific to this development. And then the town's definitions say that a long-term rental is 30 days or longer, or maybe it's longer than 30 days. I forget which specifically. So it'd be, a month or longer versus a vacation rental permit. And of relevance, I think, is the proposed revisions to the vacation rental code provision that should be in front of the board soon, and we'll go into a little more of that update during the committee reports. But those are getting tightened up as well if they get approved. Answer your question, Mr. Keene?
It does. It's still, again, from a short-term standpoint, most of the people that are looking for housing here are here for a year. So, I don't know. I would hope that, I would love to build a fourplex and rent it out for a whole year to 4 different people to make sure that they have a place to stay. So anyway,
Jimmy,
that does answer the question. Yes.
just to be clear, we're not keeping all 4 units and renting all 4 units. Our plan is to sell 3 of them.
To sell them? So it'd be
sell 3 of the units.
So it's like a condominium then?
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe in the packet, the stipulation would still be that only one of those 4 units, regardless of ownership, would be available for short-term rental. And then just one more thing on short-term versus long-term. Any R1 house can be rented for 30 days or longer. So restrictions of short-term rentals being like 3 months or 6 months, a longer term, like we considered on the ADU code provision, is a much bigger topic for consideration and discussion if we wanted to have a longer minimum rental period than 30 days as a town.
Okay, thanks all for the clarification.
Of course, thank you. Any other public comments this evening? All right, seeing none, we'll officially close the public comment period for this public hearing and turn to trustee discussion. Trustee Barella?
I listened in to the planning commission meeting. I don't know if Jim wants to add anything. Lisa did cover it very well. I felt the application was well done, and I would like to commend Kristen Brown as well for what she's looking at doing. We need the additional housing, keeping them on the low end side and making it a fourplex, I think is brilliant. We need a lot more of that around town. And I was super happy with the provisions because we don't need short-term VRBOs all over the place, and we need places for our workers. We need places for our humans that want to be here. So I think it's a wonderful project, and I'm glad to see that it's here in front of the board.
So I had a question for Kristen and Planner Adair. I saw Fritz Klinke's comment about the process for being able to divide these and then sell them if the ultimate intention is to sell 3 of them. Is there something we can do now to anticipate that process and make it more smooth? And I also saw the response from, I think it was you, Kristen, that said the process is so long for actually subdividing to be able to sell these that right now you're just looking for this rezoning, and then in the future you'll go through the subdivision. But is there something we can do now to help facilitate that if we all know that that's the direction it's going and we're in favor of that today? Planner Adair?
So there's different ways this could be structured: condo, townhome, LLC. And what I've been doing is trying to get with the county assessor to figure out if there's anything she needs or prefers, because this is going to come up more and more frequently based on the calls I'm getting right now. Re-subdivision would be cutting up lots into tiny little pieces. And that's normally a 3-step process that's pretty drawn out. That would be a townhome. And then condos is multiple owners of structures on shared land. And then another route might be an LLC, where each owner of each individual unit is a shareholder in the LLC. So a few weeks ago, I contacted the county assessor, and I'm trying to figure out what's the best way for these moving forward. In general, which style do we want to encourage? And I don't want to add a lot of extra work to the county assessor either, where she has tiny little lots all over town. But that is the direction we're headed, is that I'm seeing most of the calls that I'm getting right now are for condos, townhomes, re-subdivisions, variances. Everything all of a sudden is getting very, very dense, and the lots are going to become a lot smaller if that's the direction that the board chooses to allow. So I'm currently waiting on some comments back from the assessor, because we have to think about what would be the best way to encourage people to do this. And I think mostly Kirsten wanted to get the ball rolling with breaking ground, and then find out from me and the assessor if any further action is needed.
Thank you. And I think I've been calling you Kristen. I apologize, Kirsten.
Oh, that's okay. It's actually Kirsten.
Oh, Kirsten. Okay.
But I respond to all. We're open, we were open to condos or townhouses, and it's our understanding that we can sell either. So it's not an issue of which one it is, and we're open to all of it. We went the condo route because it's faster and we'd like to break ground. And I'm open to starting a re-subdivision process as soon as I close this process.
One more follow-on question. Planner Adair, is there any risk in the re-subdivision process of kind of undoing the conditional approval that only one of these can be a short-term rental?
I don't think so, because in the R1 and in the R2 zone, you have to have vacation rentals at least 150 feet apart anyway. So these would be 0 feet apart. So I just wanted to spell that out in the conditions as clarification. And so I don't think there's any possibility that all 4 of them would become vacation rentals. For tonight, all we're thinking about is whether to let the applicant build just a single family house or allow her to be rezoned to do a multifamily house, a multifamily structure, and I'd be in favor of that. And then we're going to need to work with the assessor and maybe the town attorney and do a little bit of research and find out what's the best way to move forward with multifamily condos and townhomes like this. So I don't think there's any chance that we're going to end up with 4 vacation rentals, because they would have to be much further apart.
Thank you. Trustee George?
It's my understanding that this was previously zoned BA, which would allow for multi-family dwellings. So it seems like a slam dunk. Do we know why it was originally moved from that zoning to R1?
Cy Scarborough did a re-subdivision, and he cut up most of that block into 3-lot parcels, and I wasn't around for that. It was in 2001. I'm not exactly sure why he did that, but originally this site was supposed to be the 4th of the Silverton Villas condos. And then I think there was some sort of a foreclosure, and Cy Scarborough decided to make extra large lots around where he was building with Mr. Moses, who's I think also gone from the area now.
Yeah, it seems to me, since it was previously zoned for multifamily, it makes sense that we could move it back quite easily and allow Kirsten to build a 4-plex on there, which would help our current housing situation.
Any other trustee discussion, question, comment? Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
This is just a little question. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, I think, in approval, but does the vacation rental permit need to be declared on the unit that it will be attached with, since they're ultimately, I'm thinking kind of towards the selling end of things, like, does that need to be noted at this stage in the process so that when it goes to be resold, the buyer knows if they do gain a permit or not with the purchase of the unit?
There's a couple tricky aspects of that question, so I just wanted to unravel it a little bit and then direct it over to Planner Adair. But one is that there isn't a vacation rental permit attached to the development today, and so they'd still have to apply, and there would have to be one available in that zone. But once one was applied for and approved, no others could be within the units. But I think it'd be up to Kirsten if she wanted to restrict some of those units, so you cannot apply for these because I'm going to do it, or someone, or whatever that is. But Planner Adair, do you have any other context to add to those thoughts?
From my standpoint and a town standpoint, I don't think it matters to us who is the one person that gets to have the eligibility to apply for a vacation rental permit. That would be up to Kirsten Brown, and it depends on how she structures it, but that's between the 4 people that live in that building. And probably it would be in Kirsten's best interest to reserve that right for herself. But as for me and the town, I don't think it matters to us whose name might end up on the permit. And I do want to mention that there's no proposal for any vacation rental application at this time. So as I see it, that's between the applicant and any buyers, neighbors that she might have, rather than the town. But only one would be allowed total for the site.
Well, we do plan on getting the vacation rental permit ourselves and then fully disclose that there's no more available as we sell. Because we don't want to have a full-time vacation rental next to us either when we're there.
Trustee Birma or Trustee Harper, any questions or comments for Kirsten? Trustee Harper?
Thank you, sir. This was the first item on our meeting back in February. It was discussed at length. It was also approved. And I think that we as a board should approve it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Trustee Birma?
Yeah, I would move to approve it. I've brought up affordable housing many a times in our meetings, and I think one route of that is just to add more supply into our housing, and this is a good start, along with a lot of other things. So, yeah.
So would you like to make that motion? The suggested text from Planner Adair is on page 15 of our packet. Or anyone else.
Yeah, I'll make the motion. I'll make a motion to conditionally approve the Brown rezoning application to change the zoning from R1 to R2 at Lot 5, Scarborough re-subdivision, formerly lots 13 through 15, Block 75, 5th and Reese, Silverton, with the 5 conditions of approval presented in the staff report.
Second.
I can second that. Oh.
Thank you, Trustee George, for the motion and Trustee Barella for the second. Clerk Freeze, roll call, please.
Trustee Barilla,
Yes.
trustee Harper,
Yes.
trustee Birma,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. Kirsten, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and good luck with the rest of the project.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to new business, item 4B, consideration to remove John Ryder from Citizens State Bank as a check signer for the town of Silverton and remove from Citizens State Bank information only list. Administrator Edwards, do we just need a motion to do this? You're muted.
That is correct, Mayor Furman.
Do we also need to have consideration to add anyone, or do we have sufficient people covering those roles?
I would redirect that question to Clerk Freeze. Do you feel like we need another signer at this point for relief for yourself?
It would be ideal, just in case of Molly or Jim are not in town, that I still have one more person to go to.
Okay.
Is that something that would be appropriate for Nathan to do?
No,
Okay.
Who would you suggest, Clerk Freeze?
another trustee or yourself.
Trustee Harper?
I believe it should be Administrator Edwards.
Okay, great. So would someone like to make a motion to remove John Ryder from Citizen State Bank as a check signer for the town of Silverton and remove from Citizen State Bank information only list and replace him with Administrator Edwards?
So moved.
I can second.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Barney, for the motion and Trustee George for the second. Clerk, please roll call, please.
Trustee Barella,
Yes.
trustee Harper,
Yes.
trustee Bierma,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. All right. Consideration to approve the Iron Horse Bicycle Classic application. Thank you for
I
joining
may-
us tonight.
Yeah, if
Oh,
I
hi,
may
Lisa.
introduce the topic, we've got Gage Sippy here, the director of the Iron Horse with us. His application's in the packet. There's more information forthcoming as we get closer to the event. They typically submit their safety protocols and plans closer to the event. It has been approved so far by John Seitz and also Kim at Holland. Jim Donovan has been in conversation with Gage about safety procedure around COVID. And of course, Sheriff Conrad is always very involved in helping them shape their safety plans. So I'll turn it over to Gage maybe to talk a little bit about what's different about this year's event and see if the trustees have any questions.
Good evening, Silverton. Thanks for having me. The last year was the first time we hadn't been to see you guys, I think, well, maybe 48 years. I think there was one year the snow got a little deep and it was challenging. So we're hoping to make it back this year. We have been talking to San Juan Basin Health, the state of Colorado, your community as well, around what we need to do in order to hold an event and make it COVID safe and all the things that go along with that. Clearly, we're not going to try to have 2,500 riders this year. Usually that is the number that we have. We think this year, in talking to the state and in San Juan Basin Health, that we're going to be somewhere in the range of 30 to 50% of that number. So in the big, so outdoor events that are spread over a long distance like ours is over 50 miles, allows us physical distancing at its finest, but we have to manage the start and we have to manage the finish. And so things that we are planning to do from a start standpoint, we have to do it in waves. We have to break up those waves over a period of time. And then when we arrive in Silverton, we would look at, and we're working with all of the different entities on ways that we can minimize the amount of congregating in the park, Memorial Park. And so one of the things that'll help is, number one, we're going to have way less people than we normally have. So that's a big factor right there. Additionally, we will ask all people, if they're picking someone up in Silverton, to return them. Please don't bring friends and family, to try to limit the amount of folks that come along with it. And keep in mind, we have about a 2.5 hour window when riders are actually in Silverton. So we close the road for 5 hours. When they arrive in Silverton, there's some folks that get there in the 10 o'clock, 10:30 time frame, but the majority of them arrive in the noon to 1 o'clock time frame. And so we reopen the road at 1:30. And as you all have seen, most folks start making their way out of town when that happens. And so we have a pretty limited amount of time that we're actually going to be in town on this much scaled back version that we're going to do. We're not going to do any festival related items. We're not going to do any expo items. We're not going to do the veterans train this year. We're having to eliminate all of that from all of our events, including Durango. So nothing on Friday, none of our normal festival related items. So we're scaling it back to really the ride to Silverton and the mountain bike race and gravel ride in downtown Durango on Sunday. So, we're a little like restaurants. We're going to have to try to run an event on 25 to 50% of our normal revenue. Coming off a year that we already had to cancel, we refunded a bunch of money. So it's not been a great business year for us. And so we're hoping to at least get the event going again this year with the hopes of celebrating the 50th anniversary in 2022. So we're fortunate. We have USA Cycling, who sanctioned 290 cycling events last year, providing us through their medical doctor great protocols around cycling events. We will do grab and go aid stations, so we'll keep it down to a minimum. Masks will be required until you start and when you finish. And so we'll exercise all of those things. We'll have volunteers moving about, the people asking them to keep their masks on, but we're really going to encourage folks to go to the businesses, have lunch, do that kind of thing. We're really going to try to prevent the congregation we normally have in the park. We try to congregate people in the park. This time we're going to try to not congregate in the park and ask folks to go off and do other things. And keep in mind, very short window of time that we're actually there anyways. And I've submitted our permit request to the Colorado State Patrol and all the other permitting agencies, including the town of Silverton. So it is our request we get the event back on the road again this year, no pun intended, and try to get the 49th under our belt and back to more normal for a 50th in 2022. So, questions?
Trustee Barilla?
Not questions, but comments. I'm glad to see this in our packet. Kind of warms my heart that we might be moving back to like feeling normal, being normal as a planet, especially as a state. Community-wise, what is life without the Iron Horse? It's kind of boring last year. So glad to see it here. And I'd like to thank you once again. I don't know if you heard my comments earlier about the barricades that we do have. Those all came from Iron Horse a couple years ago, and we appreciate those immensely. Obviously, they were used. And if you do have any information for Director Bo, please reach out to him on how you guys got those or what avenues you went through. And I am super happy that, this is figured out in waves, however it goes, as long as we can, as long as we can hold it. I appreciate you bringing it back to town, and we can't wait for the 50th. Maybe it'll just be all open and we'll all be back to normal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We're excited to have you here this year. I only have one request, which is that as you're gearing up for the 50th, if we are able to host a more robust event again, let us know how we can best support that event and, even have more stuff up here. Maybe it could even be the kickoff of the Bakers Park Trail System in 2022. But we would love to, support this as much as possible, and let us know how we can do more.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm so glad this is coming through town. I rode in the event one year, and it's a totally awesome experience, and it's such a great event for Silverton, and happy to see you guys coming through this year for sure. And I was just curious. I am fully on board. I really support you guys. I'm just wondering if you're looking at the possibility of cancellation, or if that's on the radar at all, or do you feel like it's a pretty, how confident are you in the event? I know it's really hard.
I am as confident as anyone can be in the current environment that we are in. I'm more confident because outdoor events spread out over a long distance are much more in favor than special events that are, let's say, a concert or something that's far more congregated. And so I have a reasonable level of confidence, but I had a reasonable level of confidence last year a time or two as well, and that got changed. But we will again, I really think it's important we have an event at some level, and obviously we're not different than any other business. The more people we have, the better for us it is, the better for you it is financially. But we also know we'll scale it appropriately to try to get it out of the blocks and make it to Silverton in some capacity. I call it going back to the 80s because it's going to be a much smaller event than the Iron Horse has been in 20 plus years. So But I'm hopeful.
Awesome. Great. Thanks.
And we also feel like, since we are probably the oldest special event in the area, and for those of you that don't know this, we're the second oldest cycling event in the United States. We feel that if we can do a good job of doing this in May, we hopefully set the stage for other events, whether it be how we handle our protocols, how we manage it overall, to make it easier for everyone following us. We kind of break the ice, so to speak. And I think we all hope getting back to normal would be a good thing. And so we'll make every effort to do our best from that standpoint.
So trustees, do I hear a motion to approve the contract? And by contract, I mean Iron Horse Bicycle Classic application. Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yeah, I'd love to make a motion to approve the Iron Horse Bicycle Classics permit, special event permit. Sorry, I'm going back to my agenda and now I can't find it. Does that work?
I'll second.
Thank you, Trustee Varela. Clerk, please, roll call, please.
Trustee Barella,
Yes.
trustee Harper,
Absolutely, yes.
trustee Beermont,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. Well, Gage, thank you very much. Keep us posted if there's anything else we can do and what you need to make this successful this year and what we can do leading up to next year as well.
Thank you. And I will follow up with you folks on the barricade piece. Number one, I'm glad to hear that you're using them. And there are things that you can do to the current barricades you have to make them look better. We have some of that material. And I can also probably point you in a direction where we bought those. They came out of Texas. They delivered them to Silverton. And I'm glad you're using them, and we can help facilitate that for you if need be. So thank you all for your time this evening. We appreciate the support.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Consideration to approve the MOLIS contract, noting the revisions flagged by Administrator Edwards before, and I imagine Administrator Edwards, you're going to walk us through a couple more aspects of this now as well.
Sure. I think essentially this is the same contract as previously, except for some changes and monetary changes. And I'm going to point you back to the top of page 3, which is 51 on the numbers. It says, in addition to the above fee, the town also agrees to pay the contractor $500 for February and $750. And then it says it again. That needs one of those exact clauses needs to be taken out. And $750 per month for March through May. That was historically $500 a month, March, April, and May, based upon Director Bove's recommendation and discussion. That is his recommendation. And I'm happy to let Todd's on right now. I think that if there are any questions about that recommendation, he can answer those at this point, but those were the only substantive changes in this contract.
Thank you. Director Bove, did you have any other things to add or?
Sure. So that recommendation stems from the increased workload that MOLIS has been getting busier every year. I think we've seen that in reservations. We've already crested, I believe, $100,000 in pre-reservations for this season, which eclipses last year at this time. The Fulmers do a phenomenal job in the off season of providing customer service, swapping around reservations, and really answering every phone call and every email that comes their way. We've been very pleased with their services to date. They did a wonderful job last year, and it just seems like their workload is increasing. In my conversations with them, I understand they're working somewhere between 40 and 60 hours a month. And this seems like a more adequate compensation for the time they're putting in. Additionally, those hours are for Brian and Jennifer both. So we're getting a lot for our money, being that there's two of them that are kind of fielding those questions and really providing that level of customer service. And I've seen a dramatic improvement in my time at Moelis with the services they're providing. I did a quick analysis of what it breaks down to based on the time that they're working, and considering there's two of them, it comes out to, I believe, $9.25 an hour. I don't have the cost breakdown in front of me. But again, this is just my recommendation due to the level of customer service they're providing. And I think it's wonderful that they're doing such a great job in the off season, and it's really become closer to a 9-month-a-year job.
Thank you. Does this come through an RFP process each year?
Not unless the board requests that we do, or it's recommended by the director, Mayor Furman.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Trustee Barrella?
Back to your statement, I thought we were trying to make it a multi-year contract. That's what we did with Foster, so that way we wouldn't have to constantly bring it back in front of the board. And last year was Jennifer and Brian's first year, so that was a single year provisional year to make sure that they could handle the workload, that they did everything that was required, and then to layer on COVID on top of that. Jennifer and Brian did an absolutely amazing job. If anybody went up there, everything that they set up, I mean, stellar. The reservation system now, I believe Nathan has moved it, so it should make everything a lot easier. But I would suggest, because this was not supposed to be just a single year contract this year, we were supposed to be going into a multi-year contract on the second go around with the Fulmers. So maybe Kelly or the Fulmers remember that, but I'm probably the only one that remembers that last year was provisional 1 year, and then it was supposed to go to multi-year the second time.
Would anyone have an objection to me promoting Brian and Jennifer to panelists so that we can engage with them on that? Because I think we'd want to ask them just to make sure they're in favor of a multi-year provision.
Can you hear
Welcome.
us?
We can.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. So we were just, Trustee Barrella was just raising the idea that last year the contract was a 1-year contract, mostly since it was your first year and it's provisional, and that going forward, the town historically has done multi-year contracts once they have someone who's performed highly. Is that something you both would be open to as well, or do you prefer it as a 1-year contract?
No, a multi-year contract would be great.
Wonderful.
Can we just
yeah.
have how many years do you feel comfortable with, Brian and Jennifer, right now?
3, 4, I don't know.
Oh, 4 years.
Trustee Barrella, do you know what we've done in the past?
2, 3.
Sounds like 3 years has been what we've historically done.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
That's fine.
Well, you're stuck with us.
We love it. Thank you all.
Do any of the trustees have an issue with it being a 3-year contract? Sounds like no. Trustee Harper?
I will say, with the efforts that they put in this year, it could easily be a 5-year, and I'd approve it.
Okay.
Brian and Jennifer, y'all did such a great job. You guys should be so proud of yourselves, because we all are. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
We truly love it up there.
Do the trustees have any other comments, questions, or suggestions with respect to the contract? or questions for the Fulmers?
Nope.
All right, Brian and Jennifer, thank you. I'm going to put you back on the attendee list, and we'll finish this one up. So it sounds like with the typo revision that Administrator Edwards noted and changing the term to 3 years, do we have any other revisions to the contract, or do I hear a motion to approve the contract with those changes?
I'll make a motion to approve the contract with the changes to 3 years and the $750 a month instead of $500.
I'll second Trustee George.
Thank you very much. Clerk Freeze, roll call, please.
Trustee Barella,
Yes.
trustee Harper,
Yes.
trustee Bierma,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Bernie,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, and thank you to the Fulmers. We look forward to working with you for at least 3 years. All right, moving on to consent agenda. Were there any questions or things that need to be removed from the consent agenda, or do I hear a motion to approve the, yes, Trustee Barella? You're muted.
Did it go this time? Okay. There was one item, I have to find it now. I actually did not raise my hand or say yes about the parklets. You guys did a consensus and I had no video feed. So I'm not sure exactly where that at. I know it's in here somewhere. But it said somewhere that we had all, it was a unanimous decision and I did not vote.
On the parklets
Yeah.
issue, okay.
It looks like it's the last 2 bullets of subsection B on page 61.
Okay, I just was almost there.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
What's Green Analytical Lab?
That is the group that we use for testing out at the sewer plant.
Ooh, thanks.
So do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda with the revisions noted by Trustee Barella?
Yep, I can make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the revisions made by Trustee Barella.
I can second that.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Barney, for the motion, and Trustee Bierma for the second. Clerk Freeze, roll call, please.
Trustee Barella,
Yes.
trustee Harper,
Yes.
trustee Bierma,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. Thank you. Over to you, Administrator Edwards, for staff reports.
I'm gonna ask, I don't know if any staff wants to, Lisa Branner, do you want to bring anything up at this point? Do you have a report?
I just want to mention, as Mayor Pro Tem Barney said earlier in the meeting, that tomorrow evening, the Kendall Committee is hosting a meeting to receive public comment on the draft RFP. Trustees are certainly welcome to attend. I think we'd love to see you at that meeting to hear what the public has to say about that document. That's at 6 p.m. on Zoom. That information's gone out in a variety of ways via email. It's been in the paper, on social media, etc. But if you have any questions about that or need the link, please let me know. 6 p.m. on Zoom.
There's a school board meeting that conflicts with that meeting. Is it possible that will also be on YouTube, or is that not going to be on YouTube?
It actually will be on YouTube as well. We'll be live streaming that, and that will be available on the town's YouTube page after the fact. Thank you for reminding me of that, Mayor Furman. And as you know, when we've done large public meetings on Trails or Kendall, typically those are, we attempt to broadcast them. We now actually have more capability to do that than we have in the past. So that will be available for viewing after the fact as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. Director Bove, you were with us on a couple of items earlier. Do you want to add anything at this point on the staff reports or anything, or want to point out anything?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. Clerk Freeze, is there anything you'd like to point out or bring to our attention at this point?
No, at this point.
Okay. And then Nathan?
Just one minor clarification for Fair Harbor, Trustee Barilla. We are not immediately swapping over to Fair Harbor for the Mullis Lake website. We're going to focus our attentions on the facility rental portion for Fair Harbor.
One other thing, Nathan, are we going to be, is our next meeting going to be in person? Is that the plan at this point? Is that we still in?
As of right now, the equipment is due to ship on the 15th of March. We should receive it by the end of the week. All signs point to yes. And we are going to do thorough testing, Lisa Branner and myself, before we do bring everyone back upstairs. But we're all excited to have you all back in one building again.
Just stand by on that. We'll make sure that that's delivered and tested in time. But we're hoping that comes to be at our March 22nd meeting. Okay, I don't know if anybody has any questions about the staff report I presented. There's a couple other things I'd like to bring to your attention. Well, one that's on the staff report, the package that is going through Congress right now may result in the town receiving funds for what they're calling lost tax revenue. I don't want to get too deep into that, but I'll keep everyone posted what that looks like as that comes through. That was just mentioned on the report that I was following that issue. The other is we do have the 14th Street incident happen. CIRSA has assigned us defense counsel in case something is brought forth. We can talk more about that at our next meeting with Paul Kosnick, but Paul and I took their recommendation, and that would be Nicholas Pop with Nathan Dunn and Mayor. But that is based upon CIRSA's recommendation on that issue and that issue alone. Tax revenue, we received the March number, which is really the January number. You know, we're into 2 months arrears, right? And that's up to 46,000, over 30% increase over last year for the January number. So it's looking good so far this year. And then Attorney Kosnick will be here with us on the 22nd to meet with us on a couple of different matters. If you have anything you want to talk or him to bring up, let me know. And then I talked to John Ryder. Mr. Ryder informed me that he'll be at our 22nd meeting too to discuss any budget matters we might want to discuss at that time. Any questions on the staff reports? Okay.
All right, thank you. Moving along to committee reports. Trustee Harper.
Thank you, sir. I can comment on our planning commission meeting on the 16th of February. It was a very quick meeting. It started out with the Brown rezoning application, which we spoke about tonight, followed by the Camel improvement permit application for property located near Lime Creek Road, and then concluded with yourself and the meet and greet, introducing yourself and the master plan committee to our committee, which went really well. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll go next. Yeah, so Trustee Harper already touched on the master plan committee presenting to the planning commission, kind of just an overview of what they've been up to so far in the composition. And then we also had a code committee meeting with Trustee Varela and Trustee Harper and myself, where a revision to the vacation rental code provision was presented for a second time. That's been through the planning commission twice as well, I believe, which reduces the number of vacation rental permits available in R1 and R2 districts to 8 each, down from 12 each, as well as a bunch of other clarifying revisions. And it's my expectation that the proposed code provision will be presented to this board soon, if not the next meeting, the meeting following. We also received a preview of the architectural overlay district proposal that was brought up a few meetings ago to expand south to the Y and possibly include Shrine Hill, since there's significant potential visual impact on town from everywhere looking towards Shrine Hill. And I also raised the question as to whether or not we have any maximum square footprint limitations in residential districts. And my understanding is that we do not. And I asked if staff would consider looking at what it would be to provide some type of square footage limitation in residential districts so that we don't end up with someone buying an entire block and building a mansion in the middle of town. And I think that was everything we covered in that meeting. Trustee Harper, Trustee Varela, were there any other topics I missed?
No, sir, that was good.
Great, thank you. And that's it for me on committee reports. Any other committee reports? Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Okay, we've kind of covered the Kendall committee, but there are a lot of meetings coming up, so I'll see if I can kind of run through this. The idea is that tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, that is a meeting that will be recorded for public input on the request for proposal. Then after that, we have a sort of a special meeting scheduled for Friday, March 12th. That'll be at 10:30 in the morning to sort of work through the feedback and input that we get, synthesize and incorporate as a committee to be able to, I guess it's a little bit unknown depending on the, scope and substance of the input we get when that RFP can be presented to this town board of trustees. But the idea would be, I think on that March 22nd meeting, to have the RFP ready, having received community input ahead of the presentation to this board of trustees. So at the direction of the board, that's the sequencing there. And I think that Lisa Branner's on, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we also have a regular meeting scheduled for March 16th. That's our regular Tuesday at 3 o'clock. So to just run through it, it's a March 9th at 6, a March 12th at 10:30, a March 16th at 3, and then a March 22nd possible presentation to the Board of Trustees.
Thank you. Is that it for committee reports? All right, moving along to trustee reports. I wanted to talk about housing for a moment. Oh, Trustee Barilla, please go ahead and then I'll go.
I was going to talk about the community OHV forum that we hosted a couple of last Wednesday. We kept within the time frame. We had Nate, if you can remember correctly, we had what, 22 speakers and written comments that Lisa read. We had a lot more people thinking that this was the county rather than the city, but all of the comments were listened to, acknowledged. I thought it was a wonderful forum. It was good to hear from people, to see the perspective that most of this has to do with, you know, social media putting us into these limelights, and we are not unique. I felt that Interim Administrator Edwards did a wonderful job, and so did Nate and Lisa behind the scenes. It was probably the most cohesively quick meeting, I guess is what we would say. They were on it, they moved it through, everybody got their 3 minutes or just a little over, who had really relevant things to say. And it was a wonderful display of how the community can come together to have a very civil discussion about issues and problems that plague us.
Thanks. I'd just like to piggyback on that. Nathan, Kelly, and Lisa really made it seem seamless on the front end. It's really great job.
Thank you. Yeah, I observed the meeting and thought that it was very well done as well. Trustee Harper.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to touch really quick on the Ski During documentary filming event of this past weekend. And I just wanted to thank Todd Bove, John Seitz, Nathan Baxter, and Kelly Freeze for representing our town incredibly as usual, giving it 110%. And I can say this, they kicked ass. So thank you. All of you.
Thank you. And we did get a very nice email right as the meeting was starting from John Oakes, thanking the town and town staff and Sheriff Conrad for making this production possible. And he's very excited about the footage that they captured and the interviews they conducted. Cool. I just wanted to touch on housing for a moment. It's been coming up a lot, including a few times this evening, and just share a little bit with the public about what's been going on behind the scenes to hopefully set the stage for the town to make some progress. Before this board composition took place, there were already a handful of discussions in progress that I became part of. The county and the town have had a bunch of joint meetings, or at least the administrators have, talking about possibilities. The county right now, so then the town did an assessment of land owned by the town looking for potential sites for housing developments. It turns out the town does own quite a bit of property, but it's very small independent pieces all over the place, and that the town does not own many buildable contiguous lots. However, the county does have the ability to build another Anvil apartment building on the site where the two already exist. And during a meeting with Administrator Tukey and John Ryder and Andrew Atchley, who's the housing development specialist for Colorado, for the board, effectively the counterpart of Patrick Rondinelli with DOLA, but with the housing department. We talked about other possibilities, and Administrator Tukey talked about the Zanoni's 8/10 of an acre that's adjacent to the Anvil development, possibly being available for expansion of the lots that the county's been selling for below market value. And we also talked about possible funding sources with Andy Hill, who's the community development officer with DOLA, as well as Patrick Ronanelli with DOLA. And there's a bunch of programs out there that are not perfectly aligned with the challenges and restrictions that we have here. For example, there's a CHAFA program where people with houses that are run down or inefficient can apply for financing to help offset the costs of making them more efficient and reducing our energy expenditures and becoming more sustainable. However, that still requires the owner of the house to spend money and borrow a loan, even though it's on preferential terms. So that isn't a silver bullet. And then in terms of developing a new project, I forget if it's 17 or 12 years that the Anvil development took from start to finish. And that's a little misleading because most of it happened at the tail end. But if we did have to wait another decade for another project, I think would have failed the community. So figuring out how to do something on a shorter timeline that meets our needs in the near future is the challenge ahead of us. And we have a lot of work to do, but there's a lot of people looking at this issue and trying to figure out a solution. And as soon as there's something to work on, we will. But I know that this is top of mind for the administrator role, and it's certainly top of mind for this board as well. And it's something that the master plan committee is also looking at. So no answers for you today, but just a brief update on all the different pieces that are moving around right now. Any other trustee reports? All right, moving on to continued business, attorney search process.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Sure.
Okay. So subsequent to the last meeting, I reviewed the previous the RFPs, made the changes that were recommended, and went ahead and put it out prematurely. I had sent an email to you all apologizing for that, and so it's out. It's out to the CBA. It's out to the 6th Judicial and 7th Judicial right now. If we need to make changes, pull it, resubmit it out, corrections. I just need to know how you all want to proceed at this point.
Trustee Barella.
Thank you, Interim Administrator Edwards, for acknowledging that. I did see it in the paper and called Kelly to find out how this all happened. So thank you for taking responsibility. It was supposed to, according to the meeting, come directly back to the board for this meeting. So we would have it published in the packet for everyone to see. And then the discussion would take place. Last time we also, there again, advertised all over because there are a lot of dual license holders in New Mexico and Arizona, Colorado. We advertised a lot further reach than what was just done. Durango Herald, Grand Junction, Sentinel, I can't think of the Montrose Tribune, Albuquerque. I'm sure Lisa or Kelly has the actual listings and or the bills from the times that we advertised that as well. So thank you for taking responsibility for jumping the gun. And I am not as worried, I guess. There again, if we need legal counsel during that time frame, after Paul is gone, we are able to utilize the things that are available to us from CML, from CIRSA. We have other avenues for short time frames. So if we need to refine this process, once again, just like we were doing for the administrator, I would recommend it. The RFP, there's nothing wrong with it, but the time frame and the advertising frame is the board's decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Molly, can you just, do you know who, can I just contact Patrick Rondinelli about those other resources, just in case we get into that and we want to extend that? Is that who I should contact?
That's who I'd reach out to.
Okay.
I believe that Chris Tukey, having a really good relationships with all the CML board, because CML has attorneys that we can use as well. I think Christine reached out directly to them, and yeah, I mean, we had a lot of back and forth because we were out attorney for a while too, and there are resources available to us.
Okay.
Thank you. I totally agree with Trustee Varela, and just wanted to ask for clarification or just a confirmation that we searched for attorneys out of state, since the bar is specific to each state, and so I just don't want to spend money to advertise in the newspaper if that's not something we can look at.
I will say this. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, we just people holding dual licenses. We had someone that applied from Taos, and yeah, just because they held a Colorado and then I know another one who was thinking about applying. I think it reached out to Michelle, and he held a Arizona and a Colorado. So it was just kind of within the four corners, people that potentially held two licenses.
And I'll just say that I practice in New Mexico as well. There are a lot of people that practice on both sides that are in this area. So.
And yep, Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. I'll follow you.
Well, I was just going to ask if on this one too, we wanted to receive updates from Administrator Edwards as he receives responses, or if we just want to get them all at once after the deadline.
That's my question.
Trustee Brella.
I think as soon as they come in, because we can set up the same paperwork that, I mean, it already exists. So it'll just make everybody's life easier, because then you're not once again trying to read, wouldn't be 200 pages like the administrator, but you get them, they trickle in, it's easy to process, it's easy to understand and form an opinion.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Have we received anything yet?
I do believe that we have one in, but I need to go look and make sure that that's actually an application, a full application.
Trustee Rilla.
And this is why I believe that we should have, once again, a minimum of 2 email addresses on each of them, because that way, if somebody is busy, because everybody has jobs, that somebody else catches it and forwards it to the board. And it just works better if you're not funneling all through one, if you've got a couple of different points of contact, so everybody can, be fully aware and knock it out.
So Trustee Brilla, in addition to the 2 email addresses, were there any substantive issues with the version that was published that we would need to recall, or are we good with this version and ratifying it, or ratifying that it was our?
I didn't see any version.
The version that was published in the newspaper and
all it
all
showed
of the
was the
sources.
link. I didn't have time to click on the link because I was expecting it in my packet.
So do you propose that we recall it and then wait 2 weeks to put it in the next packet, or what do you propose that we do, since this is where we're at?
No, I'm fine. I didn't copy the link from the newspaper, and I just haven't seen it. I was expecting it to be in our packet, I guess is my clarification. So we had, since packets came out, I mean, if somebody wants to send it to me so I can review it again, I'm fine, but I just don't have it.
Thank you. I also noticed that it went out and contacted Administrator Edwards to ask about that, because we had asked for it to be in here. But I did see that the one material issue that was raised last time was making sure that we added background checks. And I was happy to see that that did get included. Trustee Harper.
Do we use an agency or do we do that in-house?
Trustee Barella.
Background checks.
Typically, it would be in-house. It's a very simple contract. I don't remember if Kelly included contracts or not when she sent everybody the packets, because they're pretty basic and pretty simple, charges per hour. We can compare the last three if we need to and read it straight across. Does anybody have that link so I can review the RFP that went out?
Administrator Edwards, would you be able to just share the PDF with the trustees? And then Trustee Barella, I wasn't sure that I understood you to be answering Trustee Harper's questions directly. He was saying, do we hire a firm to conduct background checks?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking apples and oranges. I don't know if, I think we had only discussed it. Or did we do it? No, I think we did do it. I would have to defer to Michelle on whether or not what she used, Intellis or something like that.
Clerk,
you got
please.
it, Kelly?
Yeah, we used CBI to do the background checks, and it's only $5 a pop to do them.
There we go. Thank you, Kelly. And I was referring to the other part of the process, that we review the contracts ourselves.
Administrator Edwards, did you have a comment before?
No, I'm just getting ready to email this link to the RFP.
Great. So Trustee Barella, would you like or suggest that we kind of hold till that's received and we review it live to make sure there's nothing?
Or do we want to move on to the next topic? And then I mean, who else didn't get to read it? Everybody read it?
So I thought we had it. I mean, we had the old version of it in the link that we got from Lisa. So I guess that's where I looked at that information.
And I pulled it from the newspaper.
Younger and more tech savvy than I.
So as far as I could tell, the only revisions were the contact information, the addition of background checks, and the updated dates, which puts an initial proposal due by 5 p.m. on March 19th. Noting that we have, and for clarification for anyone listening, I've heard the rumor that the town attorney resigned and that we are not currently represented by a town attorney. That's incorrect. He gave us a 60-day notice period. So we are still represented by Attorney Kosnick through, I believe, April 6th.
There's a second thing that I need to bring to the trustees' attention, or I think it'd be appropriate to bring to your attention. There've been a couple of inquiries to me about conflict of me choosing an attorney, and I can assure you that there's no intention, nor was there by any of the trustees, that I would be involved in that process just based upon my position as the judicial. While staff will bring that information in, that will be passed over, and that process will be determined by the trustees.
Thank you. So anyway, March 19th, 2021 deadline for submittal. March 22nd, town board decides on finalists. On or before April 6th, contracts for legal counsel are presented and approved at board meeting. Trustee Brella?
I think we need to have 2 addresses for submission on there. Clerk Freeze and Administrator Edwards. I don't care who, if everybody's in favor of that. And then that, as quickly as I could scan it, everything else seems to be, I'm not comparing document to document, but it appears to be pretty good. But I am a little worried about the dates because we only had it advertised in, what, 3 locations rather than a lot more. So what if we extend the date another week or 2 and advertise what we did last time, I guess is what I want to say. So we get a broader reach and we give a little bit more time with the additional information on there. All I could really see though is what we don't have 2 points of contact for submissions.
Okay. And can I get permission to talk to Paul about maybe extending for a couple of weeks, just so we don't have that in between time?
I think that's a great idea.
Are all the trustees comfortable with that? Okay.
So is it the direction of the board to revise the RFP, RFQ to add 2 contact email addresses and extend the dates?
For 2 weeks.
I'm in favor of that.
And we're okay that with those revisions, Administrator Edwards can go ahead and republish through the sources already published, as well as all additional sources that Patrick Rondinelli suggests and any others that seem helpful.
Yes.
Kelly or Lisa should have the list that we used last time as well for sources that we sent all this out to.
And then Administrator Edwards, if you did receive a packet already or an application already that is complete, would you respond to them to let them know of the extended date so they're not expecting a response by a certain date?
I will do.
And I guess any that come in.
And if any come in in between now and the original date, I'll let them know that if they would like extra time, I'll make sure that I work with staff to make sure everybody knows that that was extended for those who downloaded it ahead of time.
Great. Should someone make a motion to approve the RFP, RFQ for Town of Silverton Attorney Services based on the draft that we just received, but with the revisions discussed?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Barella, for the motion and Mayor Pro Tem Barney for the second. Clerk Freeze, roll call, please.
Trustee Varela,
Yes.
Trustee Harper,
Yes.
Trustee Bierma,
Yes.
Trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. All right. Thank you all. Moving on to the administrator search process. So further to our work session earlier this evening, Administrator Edwards, are you able to provide a quick summary of what we discussed?
Sure, I'm going to go through that. Please feel free to correct me if anybody, or add to if there's anything missing. We went through the town administrator for the town of Silverton announcement documentation. That was page 4, started on page 4 in the upper left-hand corner of the packet. In the work session earlier, it was suggested that, and generally the consensus was that the introduction should include that the applications should be sent to the administrator, the town attorney, and the mayor, all three, so we don't lose, so we make sure that we receive all of the applications, and if somebody misses it, somebody else can check. In regards to inquiries and corrections, it should be to both the mayor and to the administrator. So there should be 2 in that part 2 and 1 added. And then again, so number 3 is congruent with the introduction. So on the submission date, location, and opening, that we would move that to the administrator, or excuse me, include administrator, attorney, and mayor on that section. Moving forward, as it relates to the dates on the selection process, and that's on page 8, that we should look at putting the deadline for submittal as April 16th, that the town board will select finalists and set up a schedule for interviews on April 26th, and that the finalist meet and greet will be May 10th. There was one suggestion. We do have the administrator to class 6. There was a suggestion that the pay scale for the administrator be made between $75,000 and potentially $119,000 a year. We need to check in with Paul Kosnick to identify if a salary in that range is if the board is within its authority to change that without changing the employment manual and the class 6 classification, since it is a salary and can include more hours than the typical 40 hours, because under a 40-hour work week, that would be less than what we have right now advertised. Are there any trustees that want to add to those? Go ahead, Mayor Furman.
I was just going to say, to clarify, that in addition to the dates on page 8 of the packet or 5 of the advertisement, we also have dates on pages 1 and 2 of the advertisement, or pages 4 and 5 of the packet. That will match the dates that you read.
Yes, that those dates in the front would be changed to be in alignment with what was presented. Thank you.
Trustee Barella?
No, I can't remember because I just read the other RFP as quickly as I can. Does it have background checks on this one as well? I don't remember. Or if somebody can point it out.
Administrator Edwards, did you just make sure that that's added if it's not already included?
Will do. I don't know off the top of my head after we just talked about it.
It doesn't look like it.
Right.
All right, do any trustees have any other comments, questions, or thoughts with respect to the substance of the proposal or the advertisement, noting that the next topic relating to the administrator search process will be the actual process that follows once this gets published. Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the town administrator for the town of Silverton advertisement with the revisions noted by Administrator Edwards and the addition of background checks as a condition as suggested by Trustee Barella?
I think we're good.
So moved. I'll do it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Barney. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Trustee Harper.
Sure.
Clerk Freeze, roll call, please.
Trustee Barella,
Yes.
trustee Harper,
Yep. Yes.
trustee Bierma,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. Great. So we will have 2 meetings between now and when submissions are due. So we do have a little bit of time to continue developing the process. And this has already been a pretty long meeting since we started an hour early, but would anyone like to revisit some of the process discussion that we started during the work session? Or would we like to just have a fresh process discussion as a topic on the next agenda?
I'm good with either. I had a quick question sort of to kick off a process would be, I was wondering, Administrator Edwards, if you have a sense of when this posting is published. Like when, do we think that's going to be put out tomorrow or?
Well, it seems, correct me if I'm wrong, I've been wrong before. It seems that that I need to get the dates and everything changed on this, add the background check and check in with Paul. I want to send something out to each of you that you can not respond to everybody. Let me know that that's, you know, everybody's in alignment. Make sure that Paul's okay, and then we would put this out. Seems like that it needs to go out this week with those changes. To what Trustee Barella said earlier, the list that was brought to the attention of where it went out, as well as the additions that were mentioned earlier in the meeting that we took notes on.
Trustee Barella?
And my suggestion was anywhere between, today is the 8th, anywhere between now and the 15th, which would basically put it at a month of advertising, would be very good. And that gives staff time to make all the revisions, to clarify what needs to be clarified, and the rest of us. And if we have to make a special public meeting, 24 hours notice before, which would be, say, Thursday the 11th, if we had to have any substantive changes by the 12th or possibly Monday the 15th, we can advertise and have a quick meeting if need be. So it's got to make sure we stay as clear and transparent to the whole community as well, understanding the process and why we're doing it and how we're doing it, not just for us, for everyone as well.
So my understanding is if Paul is comfortable with the changes we talked about in the pay scale because of salary, without us changing the employment manual, and we make these date changes and add the background check, it can go back out to all of you. It can come back, and unless somebody requests a meeting, we can go ahead and get it out. But if somebody requests that we talk about something again, then we need to go ahead and have that. And I'll just make note that again, Trustee Weigert isn't here. I mean, that doesn't mean but I think we do need to let him look at this and see if he has any, if he wants to meet and talk to everyone. And I'd like to do that in the next 48 hours. So if we do, we can go ahead and get a meeting. I do agree that having it out on the 15th and having it out as long as we can is better.
Great. So, stamina wise, should we talk about process at the next one, or any continuation of our earlier discussion? Trustee Burma?
I'd advocate we continue the process discussion at our next meeting. I think it's been super helpful having Trustee Barella's experience and input during the work session, and I think having Trustee Wiegert there to also have his input into the discussion would also be helpful.
Awesome. Okay. So then any other issues or discussion on administrator search process? Great. Summer OHV strategy next steps. So thank you, Trustee Barella, for the update earlier on the community meeting. Administrator Edwards, what happens next?
Well, we're taking information and putting it together. There's people who've identified themselves, and maybe there'll be a few more who want to be on the working group. And when people talk about it, I just ask if any of the trustees talk about it, it is a working group, and please identify it as such. That's just something that we need to do. In an ideal, I think the ideal situation is that we put that together in the next couple of days, get that back out to Trustee George and Trustee Barella, and we make a meeting for the next week when we can, and with the panel. If there's others that want to join, we can do that. But it's time to go ahead and start chipping away at it, and then ideally, I think that we have something back in the next few weeks to the board, an initial. And again, this working group is not going to be short term. It's going to be long term, as we discussed. But there are some things that we need to discuss about putting into place this summer, and go ahead and get input. The panel can go ahead and get input from law enforcement as well as emergency services and the other entities that we talked about before. But there's probably a lead time that we need if we're ordering certain things, and if we're going to do that, we need to have an idea sooner rather than later. I'll let both the trustees weigh in, but that's where I think we're going, is going to put all that information together. And I think it's been a week since the meeting, and so we should know by tomorrow who's interested.
No, I think that's a great summary. And I really believe that this can be decision-making, implemented plan, and everything brought to the board within the next 2 to 3 weeks, because it needs to move quickly based on the time frame it is from now to summer. There is not substantive changes to the ordinance itself, so all we're dealing with is fixing what we've got. So I have a feeling it will go quickly, and it will be a continuous thing to move forward on through the summer, making sure if we have to tweak things. But the main thing is getting the correct input, I guess is how I would say it, from law enforcement and from EMS, whatever issues they've actually had. Because if they have been reported, they've not come directly to the Board of Trustees and been in like a written form, like point A, point B, and so on. So it's not, we don't know as much as we think we do. Let's put it that way.
I'm just curious to clarify what you mean by saying that we're not considering changes to the ordinance. Which ordinance? I'm just not familiar enough with.
The ordinance actually is written that if the Board of Trustees wanted to expand the route, they could, and that doesn't seem to be anything that's been brought up. It was maybe only 2 or 3 suggestions, at the community forum, so it didn't seem like there was much interest in changing the route. So correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody heard anything different that evening, because we do have the ability to expand it, not contract it.
Can we confirm that? I thought that the language of the ordinance was, if we're talking about the route ordinance, I thought it just said the trustees could change it. It didn't say anything about expanding or contracting. Is that not the case? And I'm not advocating for one or the other. I'm just asking to clarify what's on the table here. Trustee Harper.
I believe, sir, that it's only it's only expansion, not contraction. I believe that's what it was. What was it, 2017? That we last discussed this? Or
That was the last, sorry. That was the last election, Trustee Harper, was in 2017. Yeah. So because the panel meetings will be, it will have 2 trustees. So any trustee can come. We will advertise those if we're going to have a meeting. Just that way, if any other trustees end up wanting to come to one of those meetings, we'll notice them, as my clarification.
Trustee Barella.
So here it is, 2017-05. It says, in accordance with section 33-4.5-108, 1 CRS town roads specifically designated OHV route is revisable to expand for additional right-of-way access by the town board of trustees is hereby designated as a year-round off-highway vehicle route.
Is that in line with the last ballot measure?
That is the last ballot measure.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, just let me make something clear. The 2017 ordinance is a reflection of the last ballot measure. That's the last change to the route. I just want to make sure people know when I say it's the last ballot measure, it's also the last ordinance or change to the route map.
Yeah, and
Trustee George.
I would say that Trustee Barella already stated it. There wasn't a lot of discussion about changing the route, except for, there was comment about closing downtown to OHVs, but based on the verbiage of the last ordinance, and since it can only be changed, there wasn't really any discussion about changing the route or expanding the route. Most of the discussion was around signage, enforcement, etc. And so, yeah, like Anthony Administrator Edwards and Trustee Barella already pointed out, for all of the things that were spoken about in the meeting, there is going to be some workload that's going to come with that, whether it's Public Works or Sheriff's Office, EMS, etc. So, yeah, I would just like to second, or I guess add, that we should move on as quickly as possible to do, make the changes that we can make, and based on any of the suggestions that we get from this panel that we're putting together, this working group.
One other question that I had that came from a comment at the OHV meeting was someone made the suggestion that trustees not be involved in the community working group or the community task force. And I was curious how it was going to be balanced, because when we were talking about making a list of people whose input we needed, we were talking about like Louis Girodo and Bruce and Chief Archuleta and almost I think 10 different representative, someone from search and rescue in the ambulance. And does it make sense to have like a stakeholder-ish group that has all of those people and the trustees, and then to have a solely citizen task force? that's moderated by Administrator Edwards or something like that, that then presents the ideas to the people who can actually say this is feasible or not. And then once it passes that, it comes to the trustees? Or is the idea for this task force to include all of those people or to not, and then just informally get their input? Or how's that all going to work? Trustee Brella?
So I don't think that those people need to be there every day. I think asking for them to put in substantive comments, just like everybody else, come to 1 or 2 working group meetings. Tell me, let's just take the sheriff's office. Bring them in. Tell us exactly like this. What's the forum? Tell me what you want. Tell me what you've seen. Tell me what you need. Tell me what'll improve it. And then you move, 20 minutes later, half an hour later, you bring in EMS and you have them do the same thing, because you don't necessarily need them on your panel. You need their information. So the faster that we can move based on the information that we get, the quicker we can actually implement something. And we're not rolling into summer with no active plan. So I don't know if all of you know that I reached out directly to San Miguel Power to find out exactly what the issue was with San Miguel Power. And we had signs that were not on the previous plan. So I spoke to a man named Jeremy Fox, and Jeremy Fox said, put together another plan. I will help work you through it so we can get you into the approval process. So once again, we would be able to use San Miguel Power poles in order to eventually put up signage again with a plan. And it's not a monetized plan. It's not a monetized contract, but San Miguel Power has to be able to use their power poles if somebody has to spike up and go. So we don't always have bucket trucks, I guess, available. And that's the need. And so there is a way to get some of this done quicker involving John sites. And so that's why I'm saying, and I love the fact that the county would like to speak up, but the county actually has to take care of the county's problems and whatever they are. So if we need to eventually, once this working group creates a plan for the actual town, and if we need to then expand it a second time to include more from the BLM and from any other group, then we can expand out. But I think that we need to concentrate on our town issues that are directly related to an ordinance that's in place, and how are we going to handle this. I reached out to another group, which is called CoveCo. I spoke to a man named Scott Jones, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife has just come back with the fact that 40% across the state increase in all public spaces and uses, and this included city parks, because the governor told everybody to go outside and recreate, and everybody did. So we were not alone with the fact that our forest was full around us, and we had this huge impact that we were not expecting. And Colorado's #1 item is tourism, and we do promote outdoor tourism for year-round activities. So that is something that nobody could have prepared us for, was the 40% increase, and the fact that San Miguel Power had us take down the signs. So we had a double whammy that pushed more people into our community and across our state. And it was every user group. It doesn't matter, hiking, biking, jeeping, camping. The forest was full, according to Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So we are not unique, but how are we going to deal with it? So I think, honestly, this smaller working group to get done exactly what needs to get done, to look at our ordinance, the law that's in place, and move forward with that, is a quicker idea. I don't care if we expand it, but let's get done what we've got to get done, because we've only got now approximately, 4.5 weeks before we've got an onslaught of visitors coming again. Thank you.
Thank you. So I had another thought, thinking about, well, I had 2 thoughts. So one is, in terms of us aggregating the feedback that we're getting, I think that the 22 plus, red comments from the OHV forum are great. I think those should be aggregated with the quality of life comments. I think the point was made on the quality of life survey that not everybody had the time to fill it out. It wasn't specific to OHVs. But that said, I don't think that those comments should be discounted. I think they should be included in the total amount of information that we're considering, along with the OHV forum comments. So that was the first of two thoughts. The second was, it seems like no matter what decision the town makes as a result of this task force, as it relates to OHVs, there is a lot of town-county interplay. And something that I thought might be helpful is if the town or this board writes a letter to the county asking the county to develop a plan for staging areas. I think whether the whole town opens up, the whole town closes, something in between. We are 0.8 square miles, and we're just never going to have the space for all of the trailers and other things that come with this user group. And if we're going to support them really well, we're relying on the county to also develop some infrastructure and planning. And I think we've talked about it a lot, but it'd be nice to actually send over a formal letter asking the county to prioritize the development of a staging area plan. Trustee Barella?
Something else that I don't know if the county knows, or because there hasn't been a lot of communication there. Parks and Wildlife Division did change the rules, which excluded the town, or excuse me, does not exclude the town, it excluded the county from receiving funds from the OHV sticker sales, and a lot of other communities decided to make their own rules a little bit stiffer than the states. So now there is funds available. All it took was a bunch of phone calls, and I got a lot of information. So if the county wants to go back and present, I had said this in the November joint town and county meeting, I would be happy to represent, because there is funds available back to this county that was not available 2 years ago. And Stay the Trail has offered the whole stewardship program that was suggested. They offered to come up, well, not to come up, but in the Zoom world, give us a talk about what can happen. But that's what I said. I'm for all of this. I think all of these are amazing ideas, but we need to move first and foremost on what we have to deal with as the town of Silverton. And then if we need to broaden it out, then we should do that. And then I don't care how many people want to join, because Scott Jones is willing to come. Sam from Stay the Trail. I can't remember the guy from Parks and Wildlife. So there is a lot of bigger conversations that can be had. And there is money available to us that was not there before. Pamphlets, signs, information, stewardship programs, help with staging areas, all of it. It is all available to us in the county, but we don't have the purview to set county policy.
So would there be support from this board to send a letter to the county urging them to take some action with respect to requesting those funds and creating staging areas? Kind of similar to how they sent us a letter asking us to create a mask mandate. Cool. Administrator Edwards, it sounds like we have support from the board to send a friendly letter over to our colleagues at the county. Is that something you'd be comfortable preparing a draft of, perhaps with Trustee George and Trustee Barella?
Yeah, we'll put that together. We'll try to have something in the next few days, and we'll go from there. I will say this: there's short-term, medium-term, and long-term, and I think that there's some short-term stuff we really have to focus on in the next couple of weeks.
For sure. It just sounds like a lot of these conversations, have the town a little bit bound by infrastructure that can only exist in the county. And so if we can express to them how important it is that they prioritize this as well, I think we'll be in a good place. Awesome. What else, guys?
Bedtime.
And Trustee Barella, thanks for making all those phone calls. It's really helpful.
Well, I'd like to thank, once again, I'd like to thank the team. Sorry, I am getting tired too, of Kelly, Lisa, Nate, and Anthony for that last meeting. The public input is where we vote our conscience. That's where we have to listen to. They're the ones who elected us and put us into these positions. So that's really what our focus should be. And I don't care what it is. I would love to see us going back to individual discussions and having the town raise their hand and be involved at the time something is happening, because I think we actually become more productive when you listen to other people's points of views and reasons why. There are things that I've forgotten that we did, just 3 years ago, just because somebody needs to remind me, because so much else goes on in our lives. So I find it very helpful, and I would urge this board, eventually, hopefully, we can change our protocols to include a lot of discussion from the public when it needs to happen during our meetings, at the actual point when we're talking about something, not at the beginning and not at the end. I think it's more productive.
I like that. Maybe we can all give ourselves a little bit of homework to find other communities that have tried different versions of this where there's public comment throughout, and see if there's a structure that seems to work best, that reduces the likelihood of things blowing up, but does give more real-time public comment opportunities.
You can't avoid things blowing up, things happen, but you can control it.
Awesome. Okay. Anything else on OHVs before we go to our final public comment? Okay. We move to item 10 on our agenda, the closing public comment. If you are on Zoom and click the raise hand button, we can promote you to panelist to speak. All comments are limited to 3 minutes. Seeing none, I'd like to thank everyone for a very productive evening. And this meeting's adjourned. I look forward to seeing you all on March 22nd at 7 p.m. unless we're called back sooner. And thank you all the staff as well.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Good meeting.